In order to make use of the board, in order to make best use of the board's time, we will deal with only key governance items at the start of the meeting and consider other governance reports at the end of the agenda. So item 1.1 is announcements, apologies for absence and declarations of interest. And I'm going to first start with an announcement, and it's to welcome, to my right, a very warm welcome to our new Chief Executive, Eileen Milner. It has been a very difficult 4 weeks already, and I'm sorry, genuinely sorry that, coming into this organisation, it's turned out to be quite a difficult place to get used to. In truth, the last 5 months have been some of the hardest of my life. The idea that the huge problems of the combined authority, as highlighted by central government and well documented locally, were suddenly fixed by my arrival as a new mayor would be false. There are some deep-rooted difficulties, as well as I have found over those 5 months, absolute gems. Over those 5 months, I have placed the values of compassion, cooperation and community at the heart of how we can be doing things, both internally and externally. I'm pleased that Eileen has brought her own 3 Cs, capability, capacity and culture. Over the last 5 months, I've often found my role blur into that an unwanted role of Chief Executive. It is not a place I have been comfortable. We still have some real challenges within and out with our organisation. That is why I'm so delighted to now have a strong, independent voice with fresh eyes and fresh ideas to support me, you the board, and the organisation going forward together, with renewed focus and purpose to deliver for all the communities of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Thank you again, Eileen, for coming to the Combined Authority. And unfortunately, before we now have to move on to our main business today, I would also like to take a moment to reflect on the murder of Sir David Amos 10 days ago. I know that some of you will have known Sir David personally. Without exception, people who did know him have witnessed to his humour, his engaging personality, his devotion to public service and his constituents, his lack of high ambition and his deep faith. His killing was a terrible crime that has robbed his family of a loving father, husband, and robbed public life of a devoted servant. We should dwell today on that in particular, because part of the awfulness of Sir David's murder is that he was killed because he was an elected public servant, doing his duty for the voters who elected him. Even if he had not been the excellent human being that he was, even if he had been the most difficult, awkward, unlikable, argumentative MP or councillor or mayor, his murder would have been an assault on the values that bring us here today. We are here because we believe democracy is a better way to settle our differences than violence. Because we believe that the will of the people should decide, not the will of the strongest and most ruthless. The murderous attack on Sir David was also a murderous attack on the foundations of a just and peaceful society. He died doing his job as an elected representative. Because he was doing his job as an elected representative. Please, can we pause for a moment, reflection, to remember Sir David Amos, to remember his value, to remember his family and friends, and to remember just how important and fragile are the peaceful democratic values that bring us here today. Thank you. We will move now to business. I'm delighted to announce that the Combined Authority has received a Capability Fund 2021 to 2022 grant award of just over £558,000. A report will be brought to the board's next meeting to seek approval for forwarding these funds to Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council for delivery against the funding criteria. We turn next to apologies for absence. Would the Democratic Services Officer let us know of any apologies?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Bowden, who is substituted by Councillor Jan French, and by Councillor Herbert, who is substituted by Councillor Martin Smart.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest in any items being considered today? Okay, just to remind people that declarations of interest can also be made at any point during the meeting. Okay, we'll move on to item 1.2, which are the minutes from the 29th of September 2021 and the action on. We are being asked to approve the minutes as an accurate record. If any member wishes to raise a question on the accuracy of the minutes only, can you indicate that now? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have a number of points that are not quite correct. On page 14, towards the bottom of the page, there's a paragraph about some comments that I made. It states that the report showed that the revised programme was still on course to deliver 1,188 units by March 22. Actually, what I said was that it was on course to deliver 1,812 units by March 2022. I was referring to paragraph 2.13 of the actual report, where the figure was 1,812 units. So if that could be corrected, I'd be grateful. Just a little bit later there, it says the per unit outside of Cambridge City was around 36,000 compared to the cap of 45,000, which was subsequently set. I think it's just important. I did say that at the time, so I was referring to the average subsidy at the time was around 36,000. So if that could be put in, that would be helpful. And then just at the, sorry, you're getting this. Yeah, and then just at the top of page 15, it talks about, it says in her judgment, the Combined Authority did not have anything to add in terms of accessing Homes England support as district councils were already skilled at this. Instead, she believed that it should focus on additionalities, speeding up delivery and unblocking sites. That's correct, but what I was referring to was, and what's missing there is that I was saying that instead of trying to push the 8 affordable housing principles onto the housing authorities, the Combined Authority should be focusing on additionality. I was concerned that it was the 8 affordable housing principles that had been presented to government and that might have been the reason why government was refusing a second affordable housing deal. So if it could just say, instead of trying to push the 8 affordable housing principles onto the housing authorities, it should have been focusing on additionality and all the rest of it. And then the final one was that I did explicitly mention in the final sentence, as the Combined Authority had lost its housing remit post-2022, she considered there were questions to be answered around its role and the ongoing just under £600,000 cost for its housing team. I did specifically want to mention the figure and I did say it. Thank you. Those are my amendments.
I think, well, hopefully, Shinda, you have all of that. Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I see no further objections or comments, so we will take the minutes as approved unanimously with those corrections. Are there any questions on the action log? Nobody indicating, so item 1.3 would be petitions, but as we have none, we'll move on to item 1.4, which are public questions. We have one public question from Rod Hart, who is Housing Lead for the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Climate Action Coalition. Mr. Hart, would you like to take, sorry, you are at the table. A copy of your question has been published on the Combined Authority website and circulated to all members of the board ahead of the meeting. A reminder that you have up to 2 minutes to ask your question. The Democratic Service Officer will raise her hand when we get to 1.5 minutes, so you have time to conclude your question, and she will let us know if we reach 2 minutes. Over to you, Mr. Hart. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to come and ask you a question. I very much doubt it's going to take 2 minutes unless I talk extremely slowly. Many local authorities area have declared a climate emergency, albeit with woefully late and thoroughly unambitious target dates of 2050. Yet these same local authorities continue to sanction the building of houses with very poor environmental standards, no energy efficiency technologies, and gas boilers that are incapable of meeting the climate emergency targets that they themselves have declared without a lengthy and expensive retrofit. Will the members of the combined authority act now to only support new building work that meets zero carbon standards? Will this board also, with immediate effect, query all building programmes approved by local authorities that do not meet zero carbon standards? If not, then can the board explain why it will not do this, knowing the impact this poor quality housing will have on the health and finances of future generations? And please be of no doubt, we do not have time to wait for the formulation of new local plans or for changes to be made to national or local planning policy. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Hart. As Mayor, I see climate change and public health as my key priorities. The scale of the challenge for Cambridge and Peterborough on mitigating and adapting to the changing climate has been clearly set out in the first report of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Independent Commission on Climate. I agree that we have to be careful how we deliver growth. The Independent Commission agreed that the growth objective was not incompatible with responding to climate change, depending on how it was delivered. Our collective challenge is to support our businesses and residents in this move to low carbon growth. Having access to decent and affordable accommodation is fundamental. House building is not keeping up with demand, putting pressure on housing prices that remain far out of reach for many. It is important that the development industry is encouraged to bring forward more housing. But looking ahead, these should be net zero homes in neighbourhoods across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough that will offer a good quality of life whilst both mitigating and adapting to climate change. We cannot put the genie back in the bottle, but if we get any financial support from government for a further combined authority housing programme, I will certainly be seeking support from the board for schemes being supported by the combined authority to have early implementation of the 2025 Future Home Standards. Do you have a supplementary question?
I'd just like to say thank you for your response, Mayor. Not totally unsurprising, of course, but what I would like to follow up on is just to say that I'd like everybody around this tables to be very aware that you are responsible for building in climate catastrophe for future generations. You around this table are responsible. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hart. I would come back and say we have a responsibility to mitigate against climate catastrophe, and I know the team around here, hopefully with my leadership and the board, will hopefully come to that conclusion, and we will work together with you and other organisations. I do appreciate members of the public and local groups taking the time to share the thoughts directly with the board. Okay. We can now move on to part 2, combined authority decisions. These are coming direct to the board. Item 2.1 is future proposals for One Cam Limited and the local transport plan refresh. Robert Parkin, Monitoring Officer, and Anna Graham, Transport Programme Manager, will introduce this report. Do you want to do the first bit?
I think actually it probably works better if Anna speaks to her part and then I'll do my bits afterwards, if that's okay, Mayor.
To give the clarity. So thank you for coming, Anna. Over to you.
Thank you very much. The purpose of part 2 of the paper is to seek permission to soft launch the public engagement of the local transport and connectivity plan. The refreshed LTCP will set out the revised policies and strategies needed to secure growth and ensure...
Sorry, Anna, could you speak up, please? Just move the microphone a bit closer. Thank you.
Okay. So the refreshed LTCP will set out the revised policies and strategies needed to secure growth and ensure that planned developments can take place in the county in a sustainable way. It will ensure alignment with other existing and emerging strategies, thereby minimising any potential need for the further refresh in the short to medium term. For example, the LTCP will consider the recommendations of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Independent Commission on Climate Change. In addition, the evidential baseline will be updated and potential scenarios explored to ensure that due consideration is given to the various ways in which society may emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. The initial public engagement, or soft launch, of the LTCP refresh will take place between the 1st of November and the 28th of November through a digital online platform. The basis of the soft launch public engagement is to gain feedback on the vision and changes to the overarching themes. In addition, the engagement will ask for feedback on key challenges and opportunities across the region. Following the completion of the soft launch public engagement on the 28th of November, the information gathering will be used to update the final draft framework documentation ahead of a further round of consultation. The 6-week consultation will commence in January 2022, to enable the LTCP to be signed off by the board in March 2022. Whilst the initial public engagement takes place, there will be a number of engagement opportunities with stakeholders, members and officers during the continued development of the LTCP. Thank you. And I'll now hand over to Robert for the next section of the paper.
Thanks, Anna. So, Mayor and Board, the second part of the recommendations relates to OneCam, the company and the programme. Firstly, in terms of the recommendations before the board today, item A is to agree that the company be placed into dormancy. It should read, actually, in addition to that, followed by strikeout. And strikeout is a process whereby a company that's placed into dormancy is then struck off and removed from the register of companies. I wanted to just offer that confirmation and clarification. You're asked as well as a board to approve that the costs associated with the closure of OneCam Limited, as are described in the report, are met, and agree that the remaining shareholder funds are repaid by OneCam to be returned to the RGF as part of a partial reimbursement for the business board's payment as described in the report, and agree to transfer funds from the combined authority's capital single pot to the RGF to reimburse that shortfall. Conscious that we have our Director of Finance here as well, who can maybe assist on elements of that if the questions come up. OneCam is a creature of the combined authority as a company. The combined authority as a board is the shareholder and exercises that role and responsibility, and it's a reservation to the board to permanently close the programme and to close the company, which is why these decisions in this form are coming. Members of the board will recall that earlier in the year the board approved the material reduction in business of the company as well. So this is the next step. The report sets out the background. 3.6, for example, talks about the knowledge transfer, and we have transport colleagues who would be able to perhaps assist with describing that. I'll try to assist with any questions that arise, Mayor and Board, but that's my part complete for the moment.
I will open the report to discussion. Councillor Bridget Smith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So I've been discussing this with officers of South Cambridgeshire District Council and the GCP, and obviously they've been in communication with the County Council officers. So I'm really pleased to learn that there's been extensive officer discussion between the combined authority and all the partner organisations, and that's welcomed. It's not reflected in the papers, but it is welcomed. The timescale is extremely ambitious, and we believe that there will be a requirement for continued improvements in joint working for the CPCA to actually get anywhere near delivery. So I'm glad Eileen's nodding at that. The paper begins to recognise that a substantial increase in engagement is required, particularly with partners, and leaders and the Transport Committee members need to be more involved in the process going forward, in our view. The focus of public engagement in January will obviously consider the substantive elements of the refresh. But we want to make sure that that's not the end of the story, that after the consultation, that will only be part of the plan. We want to make sure that improvements continue thereafter. So thank you.
Austin.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd also echo comments made about the degree of collaboration. I'd certainly like to see more of that. On the question of collaboration, I'd also like to see more collaboration between the various elements of the combined authority to make sure that we're fully capturing and integrating with respect to the likes of housing and business and skills in particular, that we don't have disconnects like we end up producing a report that just fails to mention at all the investment in the university and the implications that might have from a transport perspective. That's a complete own goal to have missed that, I think. So more of that would be welcome. The one issue I have here, though, is this is a very aggressive timeline to deliver this and desperately needed. The starting point is to understand the vision and have a clear understanding of what it is we're asking people to give us a view on. And I'm surprised that we've come to this meeting without an ask of this board to endorse that vision. How can we proceed with a public consultation without everyone in this room having joined hands and agreed what that vision is? I have seen an attempt at putting the vision on paper recently, to which I've commented, and I'm sure other people have too. We need to get that properly grounded and galvanised. Otherwise we'll just go spinning our wheels. The vision is really a wish list of things that we could or couldn't possibly do. How do we turn that? What is the plan? There is no recognition in the timeline here of when is the point when we all sign off on the vision that we're about to go and publicly consult on. It's just missing completely. It's not mentioned. So my question is, what is the plan to develop and agree that vision, and in short order, because we have the train on the track to go out to consultation here.
Councillor Smart.
Got points on both of those things, Mayor, so I'll start with the last one first. So I remember going to Strasbourg to see the European Parliament and travelling around on the tube system there with my daughter and taking her on a trip, and how thrilling and exciting and fantastic the public transport system is there in Strasbourg. And I thought how great it'd be to have one here in Cambridge or here in Cambridgeshire. But it's unfortunate that the previous mayor wasted so much public funds on progressing this CAM when there was no funding to support it. Just couldn't happen. So that's my first point rather than a question. I've got a question on the first thing though, so connectivity in the local transport and connectivity plan. I've read a bit about that. Obviously I'm a substitute today. Does that refer to digital connectivity, or is there more to it than that? If it's just digital connectivity, I'm not quite clear what place that has in a transport plan. I mean, people don't go down wires. Mobility is about people getting to and fro. If you want to go to work as a porter at Addenbrooke's, you need to get there. You can't travel down a wire. So I'm not quite clear. I understand the Zoom meetings that we're all on at the moment, but I don't see that as being part of transport, but perhaps someone else can enlighten me.
Well, if I was to come back on that, I think to ignore not just what's happened over the last few years and how we've seen a huge change in the way people work, based on the fact that suddenly people realise that they have the ability to work from home and to undertake, virtual meetings, would be foolish, and to actually ignore the potential benefits by improving, digital connectivity, targeting the not spots, often in areas of what we'd call socio-economic deprivation. That in itself will improve linking, and that goes back to the point that Austin was making, that it is going to be important. And I am absolutely looking towards Eileen here as the CEO, pulling the different parts of our organisation together, the business and skills agenda, and digital connectivity. I believe it's a historical thing that digital connectivity sort of sat with the transport kind of brief. It makes perfect sense to me. If I was to give one example, in Councillor Fuller's area at the moment, in Huntingdonshire, we've just released, the idea of demand responsive transport through an app. There are perfect examples of demand responsive transport from East Cambs, which is previously used now, and you can talk about telephones and websites, but actually having improved digital connectivity through 5G signals and improved broadband, that's a factor that interacts with transport provision in that one single example. So to miss it out and to ignore it and try to put it into silos, I would think would be a backward step. That's my opinion. People may see it differently. Councillor Singer.
Thank you. Quite a lot to say on this. First of all, I welcome the fact that the CAM is being effectively put into multiples, and that project is being parked for now. I think that a huge amount of time and effort and money was spent on that project when it was quite evident from quite early on that there was no funding for it. I think it's very disappointing for a lot of people that that project isn't able to continue, because it was a very exciting project, but there's no point having lovely, exciting projects that we can't fund. So we need to now, and having spent a lot of time and money on that project over the last 4 years, 2 years, and not really made any progress, I think it is really important that we now get on with funding and supporting the slightly less glamorous things that we can deliver now. And there are so many people across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough who have no access to public transport, who have very limited access to high quality walking and cycling provision. Those are things that we can deliver in the next couple of years, and we really need to get on with delivering them. So although buses are never going to be as glamorous and exciting as self-driving pods in tunnels, we can actually deliver them. And therefore, we really, really need to focus on doing that, because there are an awful lot of people around our area whose economic lives and therefore broader lives, families, social circumstances are being restricted because they do not have access to high quality education, choice in jobs, because you can only have that access if you can drive. And for many, many people, owning and driving a car is something that they are not able to do, either for financial reasons or for many other reasons. And that if that is not available to you in large areas of Cambridgeshire, high quality work and education is also not available to you. So we really need to get on with that vision for a public transport network which we can afford and can deliver, and that's really urgent. So I really welcome the fact that we're doing that now, and that's what this transport plan, new transport plan refresh, will be focusing on. I think that's very exciting. I think it's also incredibly important to recognise that if we're planning to have a new transport refresh by March, it's not going to be the final document, because an awful lot of other stuff is changing around us. The Greater Cambridge Partnership is consulting on complex and ambitious sort. There are many things in the economy that we don't know how they're going to be year. There are many things that the government, I mean, we're waiting for Chancellor's announcements today. We simply will not, this is not going to be a finished document. It's going to be something that needs to evolve other developments in our area. Sorry.
You're getting a replacement.
Is it? You know, I think it's working on and off.
Just talk more, talk louder.
I'll try and hurry up and start, not run out before it finishes. So I think while the timescales are very tight, we do need to quickly. We need to be able to see where we're heading. But we also need to recognise that this will change. And before my microphone, I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Is it feasible just to have a couple of minutes to reset this?
Yeah.
Testing.
Oh, Martin's just left. I just. Should we just crack on? Okay. Sorry, we'll just move on. We were about to take Austin as a question. Sorry, as a comment.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it sounds like a lot of people are on the same page here. I'd just like to, I don't want to labour the point, but I didn't get an answer to my question, really.
Come back.
So I wonder if I might break the question down into 3 bite-sized pieces. Do we all agree that we need a consensus on the vision? Do we think that we've got one on the basis of what we have on the table at the moment, in which case there's no point in the third question? But if we don't, how are we going to do it, and when?
Okay. I think. Oh, okay. Then I will come in. So, Councillor Smith.
All right. So, you know, under the last mayor, we had a vision, and it was the mayor's vision. It wasn't my vision. Might have been some of yours, absolutely wasn't my vision, it was the mayor's vision. And added on to that, we had a random load of projects there, which we all sat in kind of not a darkened room, but, you know, metaphorically a darkened room, and we thrashed out what other priority projects there were going to be, not based on any strategy, but based on kind of who shouted loudest, basically. So, you know, there was no strategy, there was no plan. All right, and the only vision was the mayor's vision. So if you read this paper, and in 2.5, it talks about the refresh of the transport plan will ensure alignment with other existing and emerging strategies. So that's never happened before, and that's a vital piece of work that goes on, because it's no point in us having a vision that conflicts with what's going on elsewhere. It has to be a shared vision between the combined authority, GCP, and all of the rest of us, including the business sector. So, you know, that hasn't been done. So we're not ready for a vision yet, because we haven't done this work. Just as importantly is what our residents want. What is their vision? And, you know, if we merrily today say, this is the vision, you know, how do we know it's what these people want? You know, this is top-down didactic stuff. If we are really going to serve our residents well, we will do this piece of work, we will listen to them, we will take what people say to us, what our residents, what our businesses, what our organisations say to us, we will combine that with the work we're doing with all our partners, and that will create a shared vision. But, you know, just coming up with a vision is very, very dangerous, because what it actually does is it restricts us and it limits us in what we do, because it could be that once the people have spoken, actually their vision could be way more exciting and way more ambitious than anything we come up with. So I'm afraid, Austin, vision at the end of the day, but now is not the time for the vision. We've got to do this work in order to get there.
I feel Councillor Smith's sort of taken my thunder away, because no, I'm happy. That's what cooperation's all about, across party. I know you speak from the heart in regard to your role as the lead for the environment, and that that is an incredibly important part of what we look at in terms of our vision and how we deal with climate change going forward. I can only just more or less, I defer to what's been said there, much as what Councillor Smith is. My vision is public transport, and public transport has been underfunded. It has been a poor cousin. It has not been. There's been too much focus ever since bus deregulation, ever since the sort of the turn down of the national rail industries. There's not enough thought or care has gone into looking after the public. That is what public transport is about. It's about pulling together, the provision, not moving into individual ideas of car driving everywhere. We need to bring society together, and we can do that through the benefits of public transport. There are times I genuinely have thought this. God, wouldn't it be good to have a one-cam project? I know that sounds bizarre, because I actually actively campaigned against it. But you know why? Because I could say, it's great, it's massive, I'm going to be something here, puff my chest out. But that's not me. I'll puff my chest out over the ambition for public transport, on buses, improving rail, but also thinking about active transport lifestyles. That's where we've got to move towards. That's what puffing your chest out and saving, thinking about climate change is. I think we're on the same page. But I'm sorry it's not written. I have the reservations about being too didactic too early on. But I promise, I do, with the organisation, to kind of continue that collaborative working, both during and after the consultation, linking up with our housing, linking up with business and skills, linking up with you and the business board. I'm not taking anything for granted. This idea and this combined authority should be speaking for the people, and the people are the public, and the public need world-class public transport, and that's my vision. Sorry, does somebody else want to speak? Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry, but I've heard an awful lot of nonsense spoken so far this morning, I'm afraid to say. And, I think, and members will know, I'm certainly no cheerleader for everything the previous mayor did, and I raised a lot of questions over the one-cam project. But what we can't deny is that it was an ambitious and visionary project. And I think that's the dividing line between what we're probably saying on the opposite sides of the room we seem to have fallen down on today. In the sense that I look around the country at what other mayors are doing, and I look to the places like the West Midlands with Andy Street, who set out a £15 billion transport plan for the next 20 years. Now, Councillor Nethsinger would have us believe that's completely unachievable and it will never happen. But I can tell you now, Mayor Andy Street has gone to government and he's got a few £1 billion worth of investment, and he's pushing for that, and he's going to deliver those projects. I think the problem is, if we just accept that we have no ambition, we have no vision, because nothing's achievable, and we have to resort to what we've always had, then we'll have what we've always had. And unfortunately, Mayor, the great untruth, frankly, that's emerging here, that's going to be the next lie that the public unfortunately fall for, is that you are going to deliver this bus service that's going to reach every part of our communities across the county on a regular basis that they need to do everything they could ever possibly do. We do not have the money to do that. We can equally say that as we did for the CAM. The difference with the CAM is that was going to be a capital project. We as a combined authority of this size do not have the revenue funding. And I know that officers have told you this, that we do not have the levels of revenue funding that we would need to subsidise the sort of bus service that you are talking about. So that in itself is an incredibly ambitious project, that there is no finance strategy behind. There is no certainty we can deliver this. And buses alone, as some of us have told you time and time again, will not be the whole solution for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So I think we just need to be realistic here about this when we're talking about the sort of bus network that we're allegedly going to be providing, because we're going to hit a brick wall at some point, and we need to address that sooner rather than later. I absolutely agree with Mr. Adams on this, and he said it in a much better way than I could, in that we do need to integrate what we're doing with transport, with skills, with employment, with housing. And I hear what Councillor Smith has said and what you've said, Mayor, about there's references in the report to other reports being included and considered, but we're doing it the wrong way round as far as I can see. And I say this with great fondness for Councillor Smith, as she knows, but she can hector the representative of the business community all she likes. Actually, I'd rather listen to the business community on what they're saying about these sorts of things, because Mr. Adam, frankly, knows more than we do about that connectivity, that requirement from businesses, our business locally, that really get the point around the skills and the transport and the housing linkages that mean so much. And we are trying to do things in isolation here, and I just don't think it's the right track. We do need to decide what the bigger picture is. And again, you say we have to go out and ask the public, and you're right, we do have to ask the public. But the way this consultation is framed, it's motherhood and apple pie. You're asking people, do you want these lovely buses and do you want all this? Nobody's going to say no, are they? There's nothing in there that anyone could reasonably object to or say, we don't think this is what we should have in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. But it's not going to give us the answer. And that's the problem. We just need to raise our aspirations, raise our ambitions for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and let's truly look at a world-class transport system. That's why this combined authority was set up. It was to do more than what the existing authorities could reasonably achieve on their own. And we're coming together, and unfortunately we've lowered our sights on where our ambitions lie.
Councillor Fuller, thank you. But on a point of your language, you used the word lie. Are you saying that I've already lied, or I'm going to lie in the future?
What I said is there's a great untruth and a lie that's going to be emerging here, Mayor, that we're telling the public that they're going to have a bus service that's being quoted at costing £77 million to subsidise. We don't have that funding.
Okay. Thank you for... Councillor Bailey.
Thank you very much. I want to start just by looking at the second half of the paper, well, the second recommendations, which is around the CAM. I absolutely don't agree that it's the case that there was no plan previously. We had a local transport plan. It had a huge amount of work and public consultation that went into it. And to denigrate that work is just not the right thing to do. It was an agreed local transport plan that was clearly aligned to the objectives of the combined authority and brought in all of those important elements that Mr. Adams was talking around business skills, jobs, live, work locally. It was based on helping people to live more sustainably and have a better quality of life and live and work locally. It's a complete misunderstanding on the funding strategy of the CAM to say that the project was not funded, and I'd remind everybody of the calibre of people that One CAM had attracted. They didn't come along to the organisation to deliver nothing. They came along because they believed that it was deliverable. These were serious people that had delivered major scale projects of that nature in the past. And I'm sorry, but had CAM not been cancelled by the Labour Mayor, we could very likely today have been hearing CAM mentioned in the Chancellor's budget. And I think it's a matter of huge regret that this Mayor has caused the loss of the £10 million that Cambridgeshire and Peterborough had invested into what was going to be a world-class public transport future. It was a vision. The Victorians didn't sit around and say, woe is me, we can't deliver the underground. They got on and did it. These things are possible. And I truly believe that it would have made spreading the wealth of the county and levelling up a reality. And, getting rid of it is one thing, but you have to have something to replace it with, and that is what we're still woefully lacking, unfortunately. So I don't believe the previous Mayor did waste the funds. I think it's this administration, this Mayor, that is choosing to throw that investment away. I'm very concerned. I still haven't received the paperwork that I've asked for in July. And as an equal member of this, about how it came about that there was a unilateral decision to cease CAM and that actions were taken without the authority of this board, And, you know, we have a mayor that says he's committed to openness and transparency. I expect to be given the information as a member of this board, an equal member of this board, that I have asked for. And I would still like that paperwork to come forward. Everybody constantly nods at me, Mayor. Everybody says yes. I've been hearing yes since July, and I still haven't had it. And myself and Councillor Fuller referred this item to the Audit and Governance Committee. Part of our referral was to request that all the paperwork was sent with our referral. That still hasn't happened. I just want to turn to some specifics around the ceasing of CAM, because I think it's important. There's some public money on the table here that matters. So at paragraph 3.3, the Mayor gives reasons for ceasing the CAM, and I'm interested to understand what conversations he's had with government to substantiate the points 1 to 3 that is set out there for his reasoning, and what consideration the Mayor had given to the possibility of CAM extending into Fenland and Peterborough in the future, because that was absolutely the vision. You know, yes, it's tunnels under Cambridge, but the most important thing was that it was about putting autonomous vehicles in a proper world-class public transport system that could spread across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and make it easy for people to get around to high-quality jobs. And in relation to 3.4, officers are exploring examples of solutions that are considered in the West Midlands, which will be reflected in, sorry, this is more for the other section, but will be reflected in the local transport plan. So I'm very keen to understand what that work is. How does that fit with the transport plan we're being asked to consider? And if approved, at this stage, you know, we're only looking at principle. What is that? You know, I'd like to see some paperwork around that. Again, I've sent a request in to ask for copies of paperwork around that work, because we've got this mysterious mention of this thing, and I have no idea at all what it is. And so I'd like to have copies of that. Back on to CAM, 3.7.
Councillor Bailey, do you want me to try and answer some of the questions?
Okay,
you know,
yeah,
otherwise
yeah, fine, yeah.
Right,
Sorry, yeah. Good idea.
Right, and please come back to me if you think that. So I obviously recognise your passion for the previous project. Absolutely, you're right. In the same way that I felt it didn't offer a solution for the whole of Cambridge and Peterborough. You talk about it was aligned with a sort of a plan, but it was actually seriously at odds with what the GCP were trying to achieve, and that was a constant feature over the last 4 years, and maybe one of the reasons that there was so slow movement for the combined authority and for this area as a whole to kind of start delivering world-class transport. So I would challenge you on that. You ask, I'm trying to think of the other things you then talked about kind of in sort of 3-point thing, is that I'm happy, and I do apologise that you haven't had more detail through of the kind of process that happened within the first 2 weeks that I was mayor. As I said to you before, I can remember in Soham, one of the first things that I was asked with a microphone thrust in my face, what are you going to do about 1CAM? You know, and certainly at the time said, well, I wasn't in support of it. That was a message that echoed, I think, loudly across the region, but also more importantly to the board members of the 1CAM vehicle.
Mayor, I'm sorry, you're going on. My request is simple. I just want to see the paperwork. That's it.
Okay, but for the benefit of public knowledge, I'm happy to, first of all, in regard to the paperwork, I will work with my CEO, and I don't know if you want to come in a moment. All right, do you want me to defer to you now and talk about the process, go into the audit, and also, I'll pass to them.
Yeah, just on the narrow point of the request for information, I accept it's unacceptable, the delay. I feel it's incumbent on me to provide a written explanation, and happy to provide that to the board as to the timing of that, and to get what has been requested to Councillor Bailey. So I'll keep it to that, but 2 actions there, to get it out and also to offer a written explanation to the board as to why it's taken this time.
And to be sent to the Audit and Governance Committee, which was part of our referral to them. Thank you.
And if I was to continue on then, I mean, this thing about point 3.3, why the CAM project cannot be supported by the Mayor, I think it summarised pretty well sort of the position I saw it even before I was elected, or when I came into post. And you talk about the links. It is because it delivered so little in an immediate effect for the very people who needed the most improved connectivity that I felt it was one of the big priorities that we had to now start looking at real innovative transport options, again, to work alongside the GCP.
And that, in reflection to the mention of West Midlands, it could have been many other areas of the country, because in trying to as well run and show leadership in terms of the combined authority, people from the mayoral office and myself have taken a lot of visits to areas where they have very light rail, tram networks, to kind of see how they work for people. Just to be clear, I was never against a sort of very light rail options, or indeed tram options as a sort of answer to the many questions around connectivity for the whole of our area, or indeed the problems of congestion in our cities. The problem was, as I saw it, and I think maybe the majority of people in the area that we represent, they didn't see that the idea of tunnels under Cambridge, be it with some amazing engineering options, autonomous vehicles, was the direction to go, based on the premise that it would also be linked in with development, particularly around the necklace of Cambridge and the South Cambridgeshire, and possibly overdevelopment in terms of housing growth. So I think I should leave it there, just to say that all options are on the table. I would like to think that, particularly with the example of the West Midlands, which is being developed, it is new, it is innovative, and it is something that's in this country, and maybe is also supportive of businesses within the United Kingdom. So we need to think about all options. But I will always work with all our partners, and particularly the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership. Do you want to continue?
Thank you. My question was simple, whether you'd had any conversations with government to substantiate what was being said in the paper, but I take it from that there weren't any conversations with government, because it would be unlikely in the first 2 weeks of office, I guess. I'm nearly there on the CAM stuff, but I do just, and perhaps some of these questions are more to officers, I think. At 3.7, it says that the non-execs of CAM resigned, and I'm interested to understand whether they received any remuneration as part of that resignation. And the third bullet point makes reference to recession of job offers, and again, I'm keen to understand the financial implications of that. And also, we're being asked today to put the company into dormancy. So I want to understand: will the remaining board that is still there be exited? And at 4.3, it talks about OneCam going into dormancy. If it's going into dormancy, why will there still be an ongoing board cost of £11,200 per month? And how long will that be going on for? Why is that's just not a good use of taxpayers' money? If CAM's dead, it's dead. Why is there an ongoing cost? So those three questions probably for officers.
Yeah, I'll bring in officers.
Yeah, sorry, I'll work through them. Please do remind me if I don't cover them all. Dormancy. Essentially, the company's board would need to meet again to resolve to distribute its assets and move into a dormant state, so stop functioning completely on the back of a decision today. After a period of time, I think it's 3 months, it could then be struck off the company's register. It is expected and envisaged that the non-executive directors, that includes the non-executive chair, would end their time with the board forthwith. And actually, it would set that the onward process would be administered by those directors who are officers of the combined authority. So that monthly cost should stop. Questions about the remuneration to non-executive directors resigning. I'm confident that, to my mind, that there were no break costs in the sense of them having leaving terms, in the sense of redundancy payments that you'd ordinarily get in different settings. Other points, sorry, that was two of them. The other question was on the rescission of the job offers. I'd need to come back, I think, just to be really clear, but I'm from memory, I'd need to speak to the HR officers. My understanding is for the company there were no onward costs of those breaks, but I would please like to come back in writing if I can.
Thank you for that.
Is there another question?
No, that was
okay,
it.
Thank you.
So if you could let me know that would be great. And just on the last thing on the paperwork relating to CAM, at point 8, I mean, I just don't think it's possible that there are no background papers in relation to this item. It says there's no background papers. I mean, as you know, I've been struggling to get the background papers on this item. It's nonsense to say there's no background paperwork. We've discussed it at board before, not least. So I just don't think that's correct. At point 8, it says that there are no background papers in relation to this item, which is just obviously nonsense. And I've been struggling to get hold of background papers. Right, just getting on to the local transport plan. My concern echoes a lot of what Austin was saying. I want to understand what we're about to try and ask people in the public engagement exercise. We've got no materials to look at, and I'm worried that we're going out to public consultation with no sense of what the plan's attempting to achieve and no sense of how it will align with the objectives of the Combined Authority. And I'm not even sure we're collectively agreed on what the objectives of the Combined Authority are anymore, because every time, you know, people who tend to be on this side of the table talk about the dirty word of doubling the size of the Cambridgeshire economy, which is why the Combined Authority is set up. The Mayor rushes to distance himself from that, but it is the reason we're here. It is the reason we have a devolution deal, and there are really, really good, softer things that come from that, and it's about improving quality of life and life expectancy and health outcomes and all of that good stuff that we're aiming for, but that is why we're here. So that's what I want to see. I still haven't had an answer to my question about geography. The paper, you know, we know that Greater Cambridge has got its own budget in the GCP. The paper talks about parts of Peterborough, parts of Fenland, parts of Huntingdonshire, parts of East Cambs. I still haven't had an answer to what geography that is, because I strongly suspect that what that's alluding to is the northeast Cambridgeshire part of East Cambs, which is Sutton, Little Downham, Littleport, which cuts out the vast majority of my district. And I want to understand what this means for the rest of my district in terms of the transport solutions, because they seem to be never mentioned, never taken into consideration, and I have no understanding of whether this transport plan relates to the whole of East Cambs and the whole of Cambridgeshire or not. So I really do want to understand that geography, and I still haven't had an answer to that. So we do need to see how any plan aligns with the devolution deal aims, and that's around better jobs and skills, better transport network, easy access to jobs, levelling up, which leads to doubling of GVA. And I do believe that that will deliver improvements in life chances and health and life expectancy. And some of the more deprived areas in the country in terms of access to services are in East Cambridgeshire. Some of my district council patch in particular score horrendously on the multiple deprivation indices in terms of access to services. We've got 80% of out commuting for access to jobs in East Cambridgeshire last time I looked at the figure. That's horrific. We want high quality jobs growth. We want people to be able to live and work locally, and our local plan in East Cambs is based on this principle, and I don't see any of those important fundamentals coming through yet. I thank you to officers who
Are we almost finished, Councillor Bailey?
No.
I've given you a lot of time. I think you've spoken very, you know, for East Cambs, we absolutely recognise your passion.
I have some
want
important
to bring
points to make.
Okay,
I think other people have been afforded quite a lot of time,
not
and
as much
I'm
as you,
getting there,
but
but
I'm
I
happy
will
to-
have my say.
Through the chair, of course, can I just ask you to kind of come down to so for the benefit of the time of the meeting. We've also got other members who would like to speak.
I would like to thank officers for taking the time to meet with me on the 5th of October, and I did feed back some detailed comments around that. At that time, the vision that we are supposed to be going out to consultation on in 3 days' time or whatever it is, talks about compassion, cooperation, community, climate, net zero, health, safety, innovation, social inclusion and active travel. They are all very laudable things. I don't disagree with any of them. They are outcomes more than a vision for a local transport plan and network. I don't know what we're putting out to consultation, and that's my key question here. What are we asking our public? Because nobody's going to disagree with those. You know, they are all excellent, laudable aims, but there's nothing really in there. So I just want to make sure that any public consultation we do is meaningful.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bailey. Do you want to speak on behalf of Fenland? Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I have listened intensely with you all, and I think what Councillor Smith said earlier on, we need to be working together. I'll be interested to see the transport plan for Fenland. Totally agree with Austin about vision. I would like to see what your vision is. So I'll look forward to that. You cannot get a bus outside from March to Wisbech after 5:20 in the evening. That is absolutely appalling. So I really do look forward to see how you're going to subsidise this. But as you're aware, through the levelling up paper that was sent to you, Fenland, there is an emerging Fenland transport plan which does expand, and it works in with Cambridgeshire and Peterborough local transport. So I think this is where Councillor Smith is totally right. We've all got our own bits and pieces, and I just hope that you're all going to bring them together and not just all go off in your own tangents.
It is a very laudable ambition, and one that I would like to see. You know, I think everybody around the table could offer up particular vagaries or special kind of circumstances. I particularly recognise why yourself, in terms of representing Fenland, needs to get a better deal from the local transport and connectivity plan, and you have my word, it is an absolute focus.
And I will speak to you at another time about with speech rail to March.
Yeah. Councillor Fitzgerald, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Mayor. What I might say now is not anything I haven't said to you face to face, by the way, in terms of articulating a vision. But if I start with Councillor Smith's derogatory comments about the previous mayor and his plans, I recognise that you may not have signed up to it, but members around here must realise that it was democratically passed. It doesn't matter whether you think it was a bad idea or a good idea. There's no point in sitting here looking back on reflection. The mayor, at least, had a vision that he managed to sell to the majority of this board. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone through. And with all due respect, so if the current mayor has a personal vision, which I don't think he's articulated, I've told him personally, that's not me damning, that's just me saying I think that everybody needs leadership, and if the mayor has a vision, then articulate that vision and get people to buy into it, which is what the previous mayor did, rightly or wrongly, on the pros and cons of one cam. And it's not parked, it's dead in the water, it's moribund, it's finished without funding. I think Ryan Fuller here makes a very good question, Mayor, and you probably have an opportunity today to say for certain how you're going to pay for subsidised buses and put that on public record today. What exactly is being laid out here? I agree with everything that Austin says, and I agree with what Councillor Fuller says, and I also agree with elements of other people. So, when we talk about the public being spoken to and asked about, I entirely agree with that, but we've got to give them some starting points on which to consult upon. They elect us, particularly the elected members of our constituent authorities, to develop plans, ideas and visions for them. Otherwise, we might as just call a town meeting and ask everybody what they think. So when we go out to consult, I think, and it refers in the document here, to an overarching vision. Somebody show me where that is. We're saying there's an overarching vision in the document that we're going out to consult on, but how's that been articulated? If we don't know what it is, how do we expect the public to know? So I think we need to be clear. Austin's right that we should have had some consensus between us, and this document or this consultation may be a bit premature if we don't know ourselves, which is what Austin was alluding to. Councillor Fuller also talked about elsewhere, and I heard mention of overseas, world-class transport systems. And I think that's what we should be aiming for. Let's reach for the sky here. There is no ambition in this policy or thinking whatsoever that I have seen so far. And I take the mayor at his word. I think he's, genuinely trying to say that's what he wants. But it's okay saying it. How do you demonstrate it or express it? And I don't think it is. Talk about the GCP. That's a foreign world to me, GCP. We're talking about a transport plan, for the whole of the county. I've never had a conversation with anybody from GCP. They've not reached out to me, and we are a lead transport authority in the county, as is Cambridge. So I'm just flagging that up when people talk to me about what they want to see across the county. Well, the county also includes the northern bit. That's here in Peterborough. We need to be very careful, Anna's right, about purpose. Because if I was the Secretary of State and Michael Gove is quite a shrewd man, I'd be looking at this combined authority and say, are they fit for purpose? Because let me tell you, the Secretary of State, by statute, can undo this combined authority if he or she, it is a he at the moment, thinks that it is not fulfilling its purpose of what it was set up for. And I'm acutely aware that there is a spotlight on this combined authority because of failings, perceived or otherwise, of its history to date. And we all know with our new chief executive that we've got a chance to, I'll use that word reset that we used some weeks ago, to reset our reputation within Westminster, which, if I was being controversial, I would say probably isn't great. And we have an opportunity here to move forward and be ambitious like Birmingham and like Manchester and like the North East, to be able to put Cambridgeshire on the map. The money we contribute to the Treasury, we should be at the front of the queue for plans. But if we don't have the vision or the deliverability, and we can't demonstrate that to government, we are nowhere in the pecking order for money. I'm hoping today with the Chancellor's statement that we will get some very good news for Peterborough today. I hope that is to be the case. And I await with anticipation, but I want to see more of that kind of ambition for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Whoever's sat in the mayor's seat, I'm sure the mayor's trying to do the very best he can, and I know it's been difficult, but we need some clear leadership. And on the transport thing, I don't think it's there at the moment. I'm not saying don't do it. The buses, we all love buses, but it's not exactly innovative or world-beating systems. In Peterborough, I know we're already planning, our local team here, about our transport vision for urban connectivity for 20 years. That work is ongoing here already. Where is that in the combined authority in terms of connecting all this together? And buses, and I've said to you, Mayor, personally, are not the answer when asked the question, what's your transport vision? So please can we articulate that, if that's collectively or otherwise, and I'll shut up for now. Thank you very much.
I'd never want you to shut up, Councillor Fitzgerald. I'm going to speak finally and then put this to the vote. Board, you wanted action. You challenged myself, relatively new into the post, to kind of start moving things on. The transport team across the board have moved mountains, despite huge challenges, to start coming up with what is essentially a soft launch. It is it is not the full consultation, it is a soft launch. One of the things I believe why One Can wasn't as popular as maybe some people think was because the people who it was trying to serve didn't actually believe in it. We may disagree about that, but that's the fact as I see it. Let's not make that same mistake again. Let's do a soft launch, get a real idea where the public in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, how much do they prioritise active travel? How much do they prioritise good quality bus services? How much do they prioritise improving the rail services? More importantly, the world has changed. We keep talking about a vision, and I keep thinking you're either not seeing it or actively ignoring it. A vision of a mayor who stands before his community and says, I want to care for you. I want to look after the air quality. I want to be the mayor that does deliver double growth. I'm absolutely, committed to that as well. But I want to do it, but not harming the environment. I want my kids, I want the kids in Cambridge, I want the kids in Peterborough to have good air quality. I want there to be an end to messages going to the communities that don't go out because their air quality is so poor. That is a vision. And I am getting, frustrated, not angry, frustrated that you choose to keep ignoring how I am trying to articulate a vision where the environment is going to be so important in terms of making the changes that we all have to do. So, I will continue working with you. I want collaboration. I will not stop caring for the whole of the population, all communities. And that is my vision. So,
Can we now move to the vote? And so, a reminder to those watching the meeting that co-opted members do not have voting rights on any matters, although they are both welcome and encouraged to contribute to our debates. I am proud to be moving this recommendation from the Chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Singer for County Council. It is appreciated. Given the complexity of the decisions contained in the report and for complete transparency, I propose to vote on each of the recommendations separately. So I'll have to have some help here. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm happy to do the read off of them. The first part, A to C, are note progress, provide feedback, and note an action. So I'm not proposing to put those items to the vote because they are note items and feedback's been given. Is the board comfortable with that? Thank you.
Okay.
D seems to fold into the one cam item, so I wonder if the board agrees to fold D into the suite of recommendations on the one cam piece. I just want to make sure the board's comfortable with that. We're comfortable with that. So then we move to E, which is the first voting limb of the local transport and connectivity plan. And the proposal is to agree a programme of initial public engagement for 4 weeks in November 2021, followed by a 6-week consultation in January 2022 of the framework document with the final plan delivered to board March 2022 meeting. So, so could I have votes in favour of that? 6, that's 6 in favour. Do I have votes against? That's 3 votes against and no abstentions, nobody else to vote. So that's carried by a majority. Now move to D of the first limb together with the A to D of the second part. So D of the first is permanently stop the development of the CAM programme and agree that One Cam Limited can permanently cease work, together with in respect of One Cam Limited, the company, to agree that the company may be placed into dormancy, and those additional words and thereafter be struck off the register of companies. B, approve the costs associated with the closure of One Cam Limited as set out in the report be met. C, agree that the remaining shareholder funds repaid by One Cam Limited be returned to the Recycled Growth Fund as partial reimbursement of the Business Board's 995k investment in the project. And finally, agree to transfer funds from the Combined Authorities Capital single pot to the Recycled Growth Funds to reimburse any shortfall between the 995k invested by the Business Board and the shareholders' funds received by the authority from One Cam Limited. Taken together, could I have votes in favour of those recommendations? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Thank you. And then votes against, and then abstentions. We have 3 abstentions, so that's taken by a majority as well.
Thank you, Robert. Do we need to stop for 5 minutes again to reboot the system? And anybody want to take a comfort break? Is that? Can we go for 5 minutes break, comfort break, to resort the system, please? Thank you.
Have the interference coming in again, and it's if we can muddle through for about 1 or 2 minutes, fine, but then afterwards we have to close it down because I want to make sure the feed's proper for those watching on TV. We're now moving to item 2.2, bearing in mind obviously what we've been chatting about, the welcome bus service reform. I'm very pleased, this is going to be presented by Oliver Howarth, but I am, to note, very pleased that we are joined at this meeting by Peter Blake of the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership as an observer. Our teams have been working very closely, and I think it is symbolic of our joint ventures, such as in jointly funding the Zebra Green Buses bid, demonstrating the way forward to investing in public transport both in Cambridge and across the whole of the regions of Peterborough and Cambridgeshire. Obviously, as this is being presented, I'm crossing my fingers in regard to the announcements from central government, in particular regard to that Zebra bid. So, in the meantime, to keep us on tenterhooks, this report will be introduced by Oliver Howarth, the Bus Strategy Manager. Over to you, Oliver.
That's right. Thank you. Right. In spring 2021, the government announced a national bus strategy, which involved a major change in the way the bus industry operates. The Department for Transport has allocated £3 billion nationally over 3 years to substantially improve public transport and significantly grow the number of passengers compared to the period before COVID. Local authorities have been invited to create ambitious but deliverable bus service improvement plans, or BSIPs, to qualify for access to this pot of money. The combined authority is required to submit a BSIP to DfT by the 29th of October, i.e. Friday, to qualify for any consideration of funding support. This BSIP is a mechanism intended to guarantee better joined-up public travel by requiring all the bus operators and the local transport authority to work together to submit a joint bid for funding. The DfT is clear in asking LTAs for ambitious plans which can make a significant difference for the travelling public. We will be asking for something over £100 million to be spent over 3 years. The key part of the BSIP is a set of spreadsheets devised by the DfT which will look at the costs and outcomes of the proposals submitted by the local transport authority and look at the benefits and costs associated with the proposals. That is backed by a detailed report. BSIPs are requested each year to measure the effectiveness of the measures being taken. Our starting point is our CPCA Vision for Bus, developed before lockdown, which states that everyone should have the opportunity to travel. Their chances in life should not be constrained by the lack of travel facilities open to them. We've also rooted our proposals in the large-scale tracking survey data compiled nationally by Transport Focus, which indicates that the top items that matter to passengers are punctuality, frequency, a polite driver, a clean bus and personal safety. Other sources of data are being used as well, including East Cambridgeshire District Council's 2020 report on bus needs in East Cambs and the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership's City Access Strategy. The BSIP we've developed is a balanced and pragmatic report which recognises the importance of delivering significant improvements and creating a position for still more strategic planning around buses as a core component of an integrated and inclusive transport plan. In our BSIP, we propose additional buses to the existing network to improve the frequencies of city services now important inter-urban routes. Overlaying our existing network, it's proposed to have a rural network where we wish to see a dramatic increase in mobility for people living in rural areas and our many villages. This will mirror our newly launched demand responsive transport service in West Huntingdonshire, which started 2 days ago. And there may be specific variants within the diverse geographical and demographic locations we have across the entire north and south of the county. We have identified a need for a new fast express bus service between Huntingdon and Cambridge. We are proposing trials of evening services which serve different design line destinations to the daytime services to reflect the travelling public's different travel patterns in evenings. We seek to create improvements in the bus services and other measures to encourage more people out of cars into public transport, generating revenue which can be fed into sequential expansions, gradually increasing passenger patronage numbers. Peterborough is developing its 2040 City Centre Transport Vision. The BSIP will help to lay the groundwork for this vision and will explore the need to give the city a new bus depot for charging and maintenance of zero-emission buses, and it will be noted that yes, we will be looking to serve the university as a major demand generator for the Greater Peterborough area. The Combined Authority is working closely to and will continue to work collaboratively with all partners to deliver the ambitions of this BSIP. As required by the Department for Transport, we have worked closely with our operators, our bus operators, that is, to create a formal, independently chaired bus operator forum, which has met regularly and considered the challenges in developing network and service improvements, in particular following the impact of COVID. In turn, the forum created a fares working group which has agreed the principles for a county-wide all-operator bus ticket system to be introduced next year, and a passenger charter working group whose output has been taken by Transport Focus, the national transport passenger and user group, as an exemplary piece of work which they're using in other places. As part of that charter, all buses in the Combined Authority area will have to be cleaned daily and fitted with CCTV, thereby answering two of the points made earlier on as requirements of the passengers. The report to the Transport Infrastructure Committee on the 8th of September provided a progress application on the Zero Emission Bus Regional Area Phase 2 application. A decision is still awaited, and I'm hoping to see good news on that soon. We have undertaken a data-driven approach to identifying route pinch points, and there are proposed interventions to include highway improvements, enforcement measures where appropriate, and signal improvements to enhance flow, all aimed at making buses quicker and more reliable and more punctual. The BSIP needs to work closely in line with our local transport connectivity plan, which, as you know, is due out in spring next year, in order to ensure close integration of active travel, bus, demand-responsive transport and rail that incentivises multimodal travel across wide areas. It's intended to upgrade bus stops one corridor at a time, systematically rolling out better bus maps and out-stop information alongside vehicle branding and timetable upgrades. Behavioural and cultural change will be key to mode shift, and incentives will be developed with partners to make bus transport a real alternative choice to the motorist. The DFT has requested ambitious BSIPs from local transport authorities, and the DFT is seeking bids for sufficient funding to sustain and build public transport patronage and achieve better financial stability as a result. I also have a statement to read out about bus reform. And by bus reform, this means looking at
possibly enhanced partnership and possibly franchising of the buses going forwards. The Combined Authority has finalised an outline business case for bus reform, and this is now being independently audited by external auditors. Once the OBC has been audited, it's intended to go to a full 3-month public engagement with a mix of electronic, online and local roadshow engagement opportunities to explain what bus reform might mean for citizens. This work's being carefully carried out in line with the criteria set within the Bus Services Act 2017. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Oliver. Opening the report to debate. Okay. Over to you, Councillor Vane.
Yeah, just a question. Thank you, Oliver. I have waded through the BSIP. I don't profess to be an expert in this area, but in many ways it seems to me it's a mirror of what we did through the County Council with the Ely Zipper service, which is actually put on a really decent service with a friendly operator that runs on an understandable timetable on a regular basis, where people get it within a reasonable timescale to where they want to go, and forward fund it, keep it going, make sure that the community loves it and owns it, be creative with fare types on there, and that's what we've done, and look for other opportunities to support its funding, which by putting a bus stop on at the Enterprise Zone Business Park, we were able to secure some Section 106 towards its revenue funding. So in many ways, this seems to kind of replicate that, I hope, on a much larger scale. What I didn't understand from the BSIP was the interplay between, there is only going to be so much money around, franchising only delivers so much money, there is only going to be so much money coming from any bid. And what I didn't understand was the interplay. There was a lot about subsidising different fare types for different user groups and different people, and how that plays off against the need to subsidise the rural routes, which are always the ones that say, there's not enough patronage, therefore they've got it's £600 per passenger journey in one case, I remember, at the County Council, which clearly you can't support with public funds. The route had to be cut, and therefore it's a downward spiral. So I don't understand the priorities in, if we get some funding, between subsidising fares versus subsidising actual buses, so that people have got some buses to get on.
Do you want to come back on that, Oliver, in regard to the BSIP?
I was just going to say that there is a working group on fares, and it has interesting and conversations, and I don't think we've yet got to a conclusion on where we stand with the fares, speaking with the operators.
Really,
can you come through the chair, please?
Sorry, Chair. Really, what I was trying to clarify was more which is the priority, subsidising routes or subsidising fares. I mean, maybe that's a question for the Mayor.
Probably is. Sorry, Oliver. I think it's about finding the right balance. You identified a need of connectivity for those rural things, but at the same time, if you do have the buses and they're so expensive, people don't get on them. I don't profess to have the immediate answer. It's about finding that balance, and that's about the consultation, working with the fares group, and recognising all those routes that need to be served. I'm sorry, I can't give you an exact.
No, it's fine. Just so there's no agreed priority yet, is what you're saying. That's fine. Thanks.
Councillor Singer.
Thank you. As I've said on a number of occasions, I think this is a really important piece of work. I think that buses are improving our bus network is a really crucial part of what we have to try and do over the next couple of years. So I welcome this, and I think the most important thing about it is that it needs to be done in partnership with a number of groups. I'm really glad that Peter is here today, and I'm really glad that the Combined Authority is now working closely with the Greater Cambridge Partnership on this. I know Wayne says that the Greater Cambridge Partnership isn't his area. It has a huge impact and can have a huge impact on what we are able to deliver across the whole of...
Sorry.
across the whole of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Can we come through the chair, please?
and working really closely with them is absolutely critical to getting a good bus network, not just in the Greater Cambridge area, but much more widely across the Greater Cambridge, the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. And so it is absolutely critical that work is done in really close alignment. It's also really important for me that it's done in really close alignment with the county council, because we commission a huge amount of transport in the schools transport space, and we need to be thinking really hard about how we can join up all of these pieces of work on buses to make sure that we're getting the maximum potential public transport system for everybody to use. And to come back to Anna's question on fares versus routes, I think there may be different answers to that at different times of day in different places, and that's why it's incredibly important that we consult really widely, and that this piece of work is done in very, very close partnership between different parts of the board and in different areas. And there will be a different structure and a different system for some of our rural areas from some of the more urban areas. The other thing that I think is absolutely critical about this is that it needs to be the work needs to be done not just looking at buses, but also looking at how buses link to active travel routes and to kind of travel hubs networks across the area. So it's not just about how we work with bus providers, it's also about how that integrates with the rest of the network, and we need to make sure that that's being looked at really, really carefully. So I think that work is happening. I have to say it's been a very tight deadline. So I think that while this is a step on that process, again, as with so much of the work we're doing on transport, it's only a step on that process, and we will be need to continue to work on that over the next year or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I would just want to come back on that in terms of the offer of working with the county council around those particular areas of where you're providing buses. I have had many kind of conversations with operators. As you know, I took it upon myself to visit Shire Hall in regard to a particular transport issue which was pertinent to me long before I became a mayor, and recognising how there are opportunities for the county council, working again with Eileen in terms of thinking innovatively. I'd also add in the possibility of working with health in terms of provision around transport to hospitals, transport to schools, all those particular areas where there's a sort of has always been this is the way we're going to do it because we've always done it this way. We are very much and very willing as a combined authority to continue those conversations, working particularly with the county council, or indeed any other constituent members if they've got some new ideas as to how they think it should work better. Did you want to come back, Councillor Fitzgerald?
Austin's first.
Oh, sorry, Councillor. Okay, Austin.
Thank you. I think as a matter of public record, we should put our thanks to Oliver and the team for what they've achieved in what is very short order, considering the lack of cooperation across the piece just a few weeks ago. It's quite remarkable what's been achieved. I'd also just like clarification that the final submission, which is going in 2 days' time, is still capturing some of the things that have been tabled outside of the email traffic outside of the meeting. So that's all very, very useful, I think, and helpful. It would be very good to see the final outcome by way of the submission, and to recognise that that we're in a position time-wise where we need to get the submission in, and it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It's in my opinion, in areas, and I mean this with the greatest respect, it does lack ambition. And more time would have given us more opportunity to be more creative, I think, in that respect. And therefore, we're obliged to get the submission in because we need to get the funding, but we shouldn't leave it at that. No. There is then more work to do, and I'd be very interested to hear how are we going to do that precisely and get to a consensus on what of all of the priorities of the various things, and this cuts across again the vision for the transport in a more collective sense. How do we get those things properly grounded so we know which horses we're going to back and what we're going to fund?
I would just echo what I've said before, working with Eileen, you know, with improved levels of cooperation, referring back to some new ideas, and keep coming back to you in between meetings, in the leader strategy meeting, good email traffic. It's, you know, what I want to see. And I would also thank you for acknowledging the very impressive work that's been done in regard to putting this together. Councillor Smart, I'm sorry you've been waiting some time. Apologies for that.
That's fine, Mayor, no worries. So two things. Firstly, in the people that are consulted in the recommendations, there's no mention of a bus operator or someone knowledgeable in bus operations, perhaps. And I wondered if that person would be a part of the consultation or persons. And secondly, I'm not quite clear on the voting system here. These recommendations are meant to be voted by 2/3 of us to get it through. And looked at the Constitution. I can see that B could be applicable because it's transport-related funding, although in fact the funding isn't going to be spent until it's gotten, I guess, but maybe it would be B, but not A and C. And then also in the context of the previous item, which was transport-related, but we had a 50-50 vote on that one, so perhaps that could be explained to me.
I will pass you over to Chief Monitoring Officer.
Yeah, so it's actually a valid observation in relation to A. I can't see that that's transport plan directly. It's around bus service. B does envisage and empowers the expenditure of transport-related funding. So that appears to be caught. Now, referring to the previous item, that has now closed. I'm satisfied that the voting was correct on that. Whilst there were proposals there, they're not firm enough to constitute the plan itself, and there's no outside spending. This is repatriation of funds. It's a matter I took to the Deputy Chief Finance Officer, and he was confident that my interpretation was correct, and I rely on him for that. So.
Yeah, by all means, Councillor Smart.
And Robert never mentioned C of these recommendations. You spoke about A and B, but you didn't say anything on C.
So C is down to be a majority vote, and I think that's correct. That's so A and C of this one look to me to be majority vote items, with B being special voting. Thank you for the point.
Councillor Fitzgerald, back to you, and probably moving on.
I'm comforted by those words, Robert. So I can't just let Lucy make a misleading statement on my behalf, so let me be perfectly clear. It may be that the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership think they're doing good works across the county. What I said is they're not sharing it with me as the leader of Peterborough. Councillor Fuller may also want to confirm that. He might have the same view about Huntingdon. Now, this is a public meeting, so my door's open if they want to find their way down the A14 or even on Zoom. I'm happy to speak to the anonymous people I don't know in the Cambridge Partnership, because none of them have made contact. That was the point. I'm not sure what they're doing, because I don't know. They don't talk to me or anybody else out of Cambridge, it seems. Okay, I alluded to our transport visioning, and thank you very much for mentioning it in your report. In the sense, I wouldn't say it's the foundation in terms of the bus service improvement plan. It certainly is a part of it, because I think anybody reading the Sunday Times article, ignoring the headline about Peterborough, would see what our green credentials are. And I'm all for more buses, so I share the vision of more buses, referring back to the previous article, and I think it's a great thing, and greener transport solutions. In fact, last week I got to talk to the people going to COP26 from SSE. They came into Peterborough with an electric bus last week, and I was lamenting the fact that they're all in Cambridge. And why haven't we got any in Peterborough? And it is simply down to infrastructure, I believe. I've also tasked officers in Peterborough to engage directly in terms of more urgency exactly what it is Stagecoach want, for example, in order to move forward with plans to electrify their fleet. And the depot where it's situated is very old. In fact, it was a coaching establishment long before buses and trams, actually, I think, because Peterborough was innovative back in the day, as the expression goes, and we had trams in the city, something perhaps that, you know, we might look to reintroduce. So I'm trying to get underneath what the issue is that's blocking electric buses coming to Peterborough, and that work is ongoing. So I'll try and flush that out. But I welcome the plan as it is today, and I think it's a good thing. And Austin's right; everybody should be commended for the work that's been done on here. And I have a slight concern about funding, as ever, because it's all well and good saying, you know, yes, great, because it's a very heavy investment, probably £500,000 a bus or something, let alone the infrastructure of charging, and the smart city aspects and the circular economy of how we deal with that. You know, I've talked about charging pads in the road that when buses stop, they charge, you know, which is great. But it costs a lot of money to do this, but it is visionary. It won't reduce all the air pollutants, because we'll still have brake dust, we'll still have tyres, we'll still have all the other things, but it's an improvement. But I also want to go further in Peterborough, and again that's about visioning, about how we deal with urban transport and connectivity in the longer term, about autonomous pods and all sorts of things. I won't dwell on that. So fight the corner, I'll certainly be doing it, for more improvements to bus services in Peterborough, and I know this is county-wide, and I welcome and I will be supporting this report. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. I think... Oh, do you want to come back, Councillor Smart?
Yeah. Through you, Chair. I mean, I found Councillor Fitzgerald's comments quite sort of challenging to the GCP. I mean, I wonder whether he's got in touch with them himself. But also, the GCP is a partnership of Cambridge City Council, Cambridgeshire County Council, South Cambridgeshire District Council, and the University of Cambridge. So,
okay, I think
what it says on the
I'm going to move on from this, but I just want to acknowledge, if you would give us a wave, maybe, Peter. He's in the room, and he sort of gave me a thumbs up and possibly a willingness to speak to you straight after the meeting. So that's what.
Oh, is that somebody from the Cambridge Partnership?
Yes.
You see?
Okay.
Ships in the night.
Ask, and there you go. Okay. Sorry,
I didn't think it was challenging, though.
Sorry, I'm just going to let Councillor Fuller come in to speak for his area, and then maybe we'll move to the vote. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I hope I'm not constrained to just speaking about my area.
No. Sorry, I like to represent that people, you know, just for the narrative for people watching.
Okay, so I welcome this report, and I welcome the fact that the importance of bus infrastructure is mentioned in the report. And as you know, Mayor, I asked you a couple of weeks ago in a leaders' strategy meeting about a fully costed proposal that was put together for bus infrastructure improvement in the town of St Ives, that was completed probably some 6 months ago now, and that seems to have disappeared into the ether. Unfortunately, I still haven't had a response since I raised it at the leaders' strategy meeting. I wonder if I could have a response, because the people of St Ives are very keen on seeing what's happening with that. That's my first question, and that's related to the wider St Ives area transport study that was completed and the public consultation that you launched, Mayor, shortly after you were elected. I think it was sort of late May, early June. And again, despite asking quite persistently about what's happened to the consultation responses, the results of that consultation, nobody's seen anything. And I was quite surprised to read, and I've got it here in front of me, in a local publication in St Ives, the River Porter, Mayor, that you spoke to, where you're quoted as saying, Dr Nick told the River Porter that the comments by those who contributed were still being considered by a committee which Huntingdon District Council are managing, and as yet he has not been informed of any decisions they may have come to. That's, of course, Mayor, completely false, as you well know, because the District Council is not involved at all in that public consultation or those survey results, beyond having representation on the member steering group that itself has been asking what has happened since this consultation completed nearly 6 months ago. So my second question is, Med, did you mislead the River Porter, or have they misinformed the public?
Well, in regards to, first of all, apologies if you've not got the information. I will come to Oliver in a moment if you want to talk about anything other than update with regard to St Ives.
I am not involved in the St Ives work at all, I'm afraid.
All right, so that's our transport team. Okay, so I'd have to come back with some more format, and I'd ask, obviously, Eileen to help with that. And in regard to the river porter, I certainly remember speaking to them, but I don't know if it's I just genuinely do not know, having not seen what was written down. And I'm happy for it to be corrected. I've not deliberately misled anything, and I think it may be just a case of need to clarify with the river porter, but I apologise for that if there's been some sort of misunderstanding, because the facts as you state them are correct, sir.
So could you check that, Mayor, and if it's proven not to be what you said to them, could you get your press office to release a correction and copy me into that to the river porter, please?
I obviously need to speak to the river porter as well, so I mean I have to try and get hold of them. Okay, my jobs. I want to maybe move on, okay, to a vote. So, recommendations A and B are subject to special voting arrangements and require a vote in favour at least 2/3 of all members or their substitute members appointed by the constituent councils present and voting, to include the members appointed by Cambridgeshire County Council and Peterborough City Council or their substitute members. We will take each recommendation in turn. The monitoring officer will confirm the outcome of the vote.
Happy to conduct the vote. Just for clarity, A and C are only simple majority items to include the Mayor, as discussed earlier on. I'm happy to take them individually, if members of the board would like them individually. Yeah, okay. All right, so starting with A, delegate authority to the head of transport in consultation with the chair of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, the monitoring officer and the chief finance officer to submit the authority's bus service improvement plan to the Department for Transport no later than the 29th of August 2021. Votes in favour, please. Thank you for the confirmation. Thank you. What did I say? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, can I see those hands again? That's unanimous. Thank you. B is the special voting item. That's to delegate authority to the head of transport in consultation with the chair of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, the monitoring officer and the chief finance officer to progress at the earliest opportunity the designated BSIP activities should the funding from the Department for Transport be approved. Votes in favour? That's unanimous. And the final part, approve public engagement on the bus reform proposals following completion of the independent audit of the outline business case. Votes in favour, please. That's unanimous again. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest keep going for a little while longer. And item 2.3 is the Oxcam ARC Spatial Framework Position Statement. This report will be introduced by Paul Rains, the Director of Delivery and Strategy. Paul.
Thank you very much, Matt. Just to recap, although I know members are aware of this, the government is planning to bring forward what it calls a spatial framework for the Oxford to Cambridge ARC, which would have the status of national planning policy and also of national transport policy. So that means it would have weight in any plans that we ourselves wanted to make in this area. They conducted a consultation between the 20th of July and the 12th of October. It was a very high-level consultation looking at developing a vision. It was aimed principally at the wider public, and in particular what officials have told us was that the target audience was people who had never engaged with planning processes or planning consultations before. It was mainly delivered via a digital platform, and it was quite simply structured. It invited people to rate the importance of particular themes on a scale of very important to not very important, and had very limited scope for putting in written comments. I understand from conversations with civil servants that they're very satisfied with the response that they've received. In particular, I probably can't, I'm not allowed to give you the numbers, but they feel they've got getting on for half of the responses from people who had never engaged with a process like that before. So I think that they feel quite pleased with what they've got. The government will issue its report on and response to the consultation in the spring when they get to the next stage of developing the spatial framework, of which more in a moment. Now, we didn't really feel, and this was discussed obviously with leaders, that we were the key target audience for this consultation, but the civil servants did ask us to make a response for the record, and you have in your report the officer response that we put in following discussion with the leaders. One of the features of this consultation is that though it identifies these themes, it doesn't really get into the stuff that we do every day, which is making trade-offs between them. So, for example, there's a statement that development should take place in the most environmentally suitable place, but at the same time it also says development should take place in the place where transport links are. You know, if you're making a local plan, that's actually a choice, a trade-off very often, which in this consultation that's not surfaced, and the consultation in particular didn't get anywhere near discussing locations for development or housing numbers. So with the guidance of leaders, what we have done is built on the responses to this consultation that have been made by constituent authorities, by parish councils, by interest groups in the area. Obviously, it's quite difficult for us to stand over individuals' shoulders and see what they've put into their mobile phones on the government's app. But and the paragraph 2.5 in the report summarises the emerging common themes from responses in the area. Maybe just to add a bit more to that, because we've had some more from parish councils since. Again, water coming out as a very important theme, the climate impact of development, housing, concern about housing numbers. Interestingly, from several parishes, a narrative about the balance between the north and the south of England. Why is the government paying so much attention to the south of England? Concern from some parishes that it's very top-down, and themes that we'll be very familiar with on the need for infrastructure, including one parish that's proposing a new bypass as part of its response. It's the next phase is probably the important one. The government is now between closing the consultation and next spring going to be moving to options and policies for this spatial framework. We're suggesting through this paper that you mandate us to really get involved in the detailed conversation with government about that. And it's probably worth stressing we're part of a team. So a number of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough chief executives and others are chairing, members of, leading various work streams within the Oxcam work. And obviously Councillor Smith is leading in particular the work on the environment. So this is very much a team effort by myself, Stephen Kelly, Joe Lancaster, and a range of other people who are working on this. We're very well plugged into those structures, and we have bilateral conversations also with the new department, Deluxe, I think they're choosing to call themselves, and we're looking for you today to give us a mandate to build on what constituent authorities are saying, what local interest groups are saying, what parishes are saying, and take that into the conversation with government as those conversations get more specific and crunchier.
Crunchier. Thank you, Paul. Opening the report for discussion by the board. Councillor Singer.
I'll be very brief on this. Having gone on the app and done it on my phone as an individual, it was a very high level, very kind of general consultation. I think our response is also pretty high level and general. So I think the key point on this is exactly what Paul has just said, that after this things are going to get crunchier, that actually the next stage of this process is going to be where it gets really difficult. I think there are quite a lot of people in our communities who are quite concerned about what is going to be in that second part, and I think that the key message that we need to get out from the combined authority and from many of our local areas as well is that we're probably better off still playing a part in this, trying to make sure that this is something that is done with local communities, because otherwise it's going to be done to us, and we don't want stuff to be done to us. So the next stage is going to be really difficult, and I think it is going to be difficult, but the more we can be engaged with trying to make sure that we get the things that our communities need, the better. This response is not very, it doesn't tell you very much. It will be what comes next that's really harder. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to come in? Okay, well, with a slightly wry and raised eyebrow, I note that the public consultation, Austin, was called Creating a Vision for the Oxcam Arc. It would appear that the government doesn't have their vision, so they're asking the public to create a vision. I suspect that's what I'm trying to achieve in our previous thing, but vision is a difficult thing to to actually define, but I think it's part that we should be involved in it. So shall we move to a vote? Moving the recommendations from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Smith. So votes in favour, please raise your hands. There's votes against. So it's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. So perhaps onto a more definitive issue, which I'm pleased we are bringing to the meeting today. That is of strategic water issues. The Director of Delivery and Strategy, Paul, you are staying to introduce this very important report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And this actually, I think, follows very neatly on what we've just been discussing about the Oxcam Arc, since so many respondents to that consultation highlighted the significance of water issues for this area. This is both a strategic infrastructure growth enabling issue. It's also a climate change issue. I think all of you board members are very familiar with the broad questions. This is an area that, at one level has very low rainfall, at another level has a very high flood risk. The excellent evidence base for the Greater Cambridge Local Plan has identified the way in which future water supply is a very significant constraint on growth. That's dependent on national water infrastructure planning processes, which we in the past have not been directly involved in. And so what the proposal before you today would do would be to get the combined authority directly more involved in those conversations. There are two specific opportunities in front of us, one of which is an opportunity to join something called Water Resources East, which is a formal part of the way in which water infrastructure is planned, and the plan developed by Water Resources East will inform Ofwat, DEFRA and others in the way in which they regulate the future investment plans of the water companies. So if we want to try and crack some of the issues that have, for example, come out of the Greater Cambridge Local Plan work, that's a table that Cambridgeshire and Peterborough should be at, and they have in fact invited us anyway to join, as you'll see from the papers. The mechanics of joining would be to join the board of a company limited by guarantee and make a small financial contribution. That's set out in the papers. The second initiative actually involves some of the same players, but has a slightly different emphasis, and this is the Future Fens Integrated Adaptation Initiative, which Anglian Water is playing a very significant role in, but also the Environment Agency. That's looking not simply at water supply issues, but at the economic future and the climate adaptation issues for the Fens, very broadly considered. So they're looking up into Lincolnshire and beyond the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough boundaries. One of the interesting little facts that's just come out of their research so far is that if you compare the Fenland area in our geography with, let's say, Zeeland in the Netherlands, actually productivity per acre of agricultural land is significantly lower here than it is in those areas. So they're developing an economic story complemented by the water infrastructure story. There we're being asked, or the Mayor has been invited to join a sponsorship group, and again to make a contribution in cash or in kind. The way our staffing is currently arranged, we can't, as some people have, make a secondee, so we're recommending a cash contribution to help take that work to its next stage. And that's the report, Mayor.
Thank you, Paul. Opening the report for debate by the board. Oh, okay. Councillor Singer.
If no one else is going to say anything. So I think it is really important that we're involved with this work. It's absolutely crucial to the to our ability to deliver green growth, which is what we have to try and do to get our water planning right. We absolutely won't be able to do that without that. And it's not just about trying to make sure that we can deliver new housing, which is already a massive challenge. It's also about making sure that we're not drawing that our current area is properly defended against flooding. Water patterns are changing. There's a huge amount of work that needs to be done to make sure that current communities are protected and have sufficient water without us doing that massive damage to the environment. So this is hugely important. I'm really pleased that the Combined Authority is getting involved. It's about time they did, and all of our organisations need to be involved, and many of us already are. So my final point is that, assuming that A and B go through on recommendation C, I would be really keen to know quickly who it's suggested the senior officer is, who will be representing the Combined Authority on the board, to make sure that they are working really closely with other partner organisations. And we have at the County Council quite a number of our officers who are already quite engaged in this work, and if they can be helpful, we would be keen to be supportive of the Combined Authority's work in this area. That's all.
Thank you for the supportive comments, and yes, obviously, I would look to Eileen for sorting out who's the most appropriate person to be representing, for us all as the board, working on it. Thank you. Yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question on that? I don't know whether it's always likely to be a senior officer from the Combined Authority who would need to represent the Combined Authority, or whether it would be interesting to, whether you would consider having somebody from another authority as the Combined Authority representative.
It's a fair point, but I would defer to my CEO. Oh, no, Councillor Smart, you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. So I'm pleased that there's been a lot of publicity recently about water authorities pumping raw sewage into our waterways, and also, we're not pleased about it, but pleased to hear that it's being publicised more and that government's taking notice, and also that there isn't enough water to build new buildings, seemingly, but we're still building them. But my question is on B, so £7,500. So how's that figure arrived at? It's an Anglian Water set up. Why can't we just put £1 in? Do we have to put all of that money in? It's our money.
Gosh, I don't know if I've got an answer to that. Is there anything you could maybe come to explain why it was that amount, and does it offer value for money? Look, let's be honest, I want to be part of it, and if we have to spend that money to be at the table and part of it to help it deliver an improvement, I would see it as a fair enough sum, but I see the point. Do you want to come back, Paul?
To Councillor Smart's question, the number is arrived at as being the same contribution that other partners have been putting in, basically, so they're asking us to join on equal terms to the ones who are already there. That's where the number comes from.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Bailey, sorry.
Yeah, just briefly. I think it's the equivalent of a sort of person, isn't it, basically? Meant to be. Yeah, I totally support this. I wonder why it didn't come through leaders. It wasn't on the forward agenda, so it doesn't matter. And also, just to say, this is very important to East Cambridgeshire, which is earmarked as one of the possible areas for new reservoir, which brings its challenges, but obviously opportunity as well. But it would be remiss at this point if I didn't cite the huge concerns of the local population around the maintenance or perceived lack of, by the Environment Agency, of the ooze washes defence infrastructure, which protects enormous swathes of Cambridgeshire geography from flooding. and there are massive issues at the moment, long-standing issues around a complete mismatch over what the local population understands to be appropriate maintenance from their years of history and what the current Environment Agency management is going on, and a recent potentially, if it's gone wrong, catastrophic incident. I hasten to add that the Environment Agency are very robustly defending the work that's taken place, but there is a lot of concern over this locally, and then coupled with, you know, reservoirs and things like that. So it's absolutely critical that we are at the table, and therefore I totally support it.
Thank you for the support, Councillor Bailey, and I would obviously, you know, recognise the specific knowledge for leaders from different areas, what you will be bringing to by having your ear to the ground from those communities, and then with that information, you know, coming to the table through the senior officer. It's one of the reasons I think it was so important to move this forward. Just on the point of sort of governance, because it did come up, I did ask about this point about coming directly to the board rather than to the leaders. Apparently it was raised as an oral addition to the item on Oxcam at the leaders strategy meeting on the 11th of October, and at the time attracted no comment from the leaders. I have to say I don't recall it myself, but then apparently we did talk about it. But you know, we talk about a lot of things, and sometimes we, you know, these things may have just been passed by, but I think we can all agree, and I'm going to move to the vote, that this is an important issue that we need to vote on. So I'll move the recommendation from the chair. Do I have a seconder from Councillor Bailey? Thank you. So votes in favour? Unanimous. Okay. So we now move on to, if I'm assuming you want to move on because it's 12:10 and okay. Net zero, Item 2.5 is net zero compliant policy making an immediate difference. Adrian Cannard, the Strategic Planning Manager, will introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon now, Board. The Independent Commission on Climate gave 31 recommendations to the Combined Authority, other organisations and residents. The report before you sets out the actions for the Combined Authority, and as guided by this board, it focuses on the actions the Combined Authority can take now in respect of its operations and its current budget. It will be complemented by climate issues being addressed in the ongoing refresh of the other Combined Authority policies, such as skills and the transport strategy, as we've heard earlier today, which will have a strong bearing on delivery. The Commission's recommendations overall require many organisations working both individually and collectively to deliver action on climate. The Board agreed previously to support a climate working group that will bring together councils, utility companies, businesses, environmental, government and other agencies and stakeholders to look at this. The Climate Working Group will therefore provide the forum to develop the actions to address the full range of the Commission's recommendations beyond those of the Combined Authority. It will be supported by an officer group that will build on existing partnership working and the existing climate action plans that exist, and it will include the lead officers on climate from respective constituent councils. It's important to note that many organisations are already taking action across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough on climate, including councils and the Combined Authority. In terms of the Combined Authority's own direct emissions of greenhouse gases, they're relatively small as an organisation, but there's an opportunity to leverage the Combined Authority's purchasing power and the delivery of our future infrastructure projects to tackle future emissions. The report therefore brings forward a proposal to adjust our procurement policies so we can start to take more account of climate factors in the weighting given under procurement, and also to look at how we assess our future projects. We will take feedback from the business board on the impact on the local supply chain and small businesses in terms of that change to the procurement policy, to make sure that we are still supporting our overall local economy as we can legally through our procurement processes. The Commission have recently launched their full report with additional recommendations, which we will bring back to the November board as an initial consideration of those new recommendations. That concludes my introduction.
Thank you, Adrian. Before I open the report for debate, I think it's only appropriate I ask Councillor Smith, as our if she wants to make any initial comments in her role as the lead member for the Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So we all know that the recommendations from the Climate Commission are ambitious and they are difficult, but they are vital and they are non-negotiable if we are to have any impact at all on climate change. We recently discussed in an informal meeting how hard it will be for us to deliver on some of them and how costly it will be. But that's just us as leaders being realistic and facing up to the scale of the problem, and that's what we are meant to do, that's our jobs. But as we look to COP26 and the failure of some world leaders to show the leadership that their countries need and their citizens want, it's left up to us in local government to yet again step into the breach, just as we have done in the pandemic. So when all the odds were stacked against us and government was letting us down, it was all of us that were fleet of foot enough to really make a difference by acting smartly, quickly and cost effectively. So, okay, we can't decarbonise the energy industry and we can't clear up the oceans, but we can, and we have during the pandemic led real behaviour change that has undoubtedly saved thousands of lives from COVID and can save thousands of lives more from the effects of climate change. So dealing with the pandemic was really difficult, but we did it because we had to, and now we have to deal with climate change. And we can, if we work together, do it again. We can refocus our organisations and their budgets, we can lead by example, and we can speak directly and effectively to our residents and our businesses because they know us and they trust us, more than they trust government, in fact. And I know it will be hard and we won't get it all right and we won't achieve everything that we want to or which the Climate Commission has indicated we should, but we have to try and our residents expect us to try. So for this reason, Mayor and colleagues, I hope all of you will be fully supportive of the recommendations of the Climate Commission and will accept all of the recommendations in this paper. Thank you.
I'll open the report to the board for debate.
Just to note, we have had notice of a proposed amendment from Councillor Bailey, and this may be an opportunity for her to make that proposal, seek a seconder, and talk to it.
Okay, over to you, Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you very much. And my amendment is an amendment to recommendation A, and essentially, in a nutshell, it's about pushing the action plan much harder and much faster and in much more detail and making it more publicly accessible. And I just want to remind everybody that despite wide reporting across the Cambridgeshire geography by local media and this Combined Authorities comms team, the board didn't actually agree with all the climate change recommendations. We have not signed up to them all. There are a number of very thorny ones that we haven't got a resolution to yet, and I think I was much misrepresented in the last board meeting where I was calling to try and get immediate work on those difficult ones and to make sure that we were all moving forward together in a place where we were together on this, and I think I've been badly misrepresented on what I was trying to do at the last board meeting. There's a lot of very intensive and rapid work that's needed to get on with all the recommendations, but especially the thorny ones that have not yet been agreed. And I have to say that having been lectured in June that the house is on fire, there has been disappointingly little progress since June, which is now 5 months ago. So I am pleased to see it starting to get going. Councillor Smith talks in particular about working together, and Councillor Smith, I'm sorry to bring it up again, but I asked 5 months ago now for South Cambs very kindly offered to share its plan on its waste fleet, which it says it's got the waste fleet.
I believe they've done so.
Problem
Sorry,
sorted.
told me it's gone.
Can we
to-
go? Sorry, can we please come through the chair?
And here we are 5 months later, and I still haven't seen it. So if we're going to work together, you know, offers to share things would be gratefully received. I look forward to getting it. I just wanted to in relation to Mr. Hart's question earlier, because you've been sitting waiting patiently to hear this item. So I wanted to address, you know, local plans are really difficult. You know that they can't be changed overnight. But in East Cambs, we've pushed ours as far as we can by adopting an environment supplementary planning document, which helps to encourage and control, and a climate change supplementary planning document. So we are doing everything we can with our planning tools. Where we can control it, we absolutely do. And in relation to a site that we've had direct involvement in, the Kennet Garden Village site, I'm very delighted to announce 500 new homes coming in East Cambridgeshire, direct involvement from our own trading company. That is going to be a net zero development, so it's going to have homes that are energy and water efficient, heated by air source heat pumps, solar panels, electric vehicle charging, and it will be nearest damn it net zero development. So we're doing what we can. We're trying. And East Cambs actually is very huge in renewable energy generation. Little East Cambs, smallest authority in the area, generating the most megawatt hours of renewable energy, 427,000 megawatt hours, compared to South Cambs at 383,000, and unsurprisingly Cambridge at 11,000 megawatt hours. And in fact I worked it out that East Cambridgeshire has enough renewable energy to power 110,000 homes, which is 3 times the number of homes in our district. So there is a lot of good stuff to celebrate, but clearly we need to go faster. So my amendment, Appendix 1 of the agenda, it certainly provides a useful breakdown of the recommendations, and it includes some timings and commentary as to how the Combined Authority intends to take the recommendations forward. So I totally support its content. But I think it's largely drafted in a form of a sort of internal project management tool rather than an action plan for wider consumption. And we have to get everybody signed up to this. So it's not only about board members, but this is about wider stakeholders, whether that's other organisations, business, residents. It's got to have an easy to digest, clear and engaging action plan in place to deliver on these crucial recommendations. And I think it currently fails to meet that task. And if we don't have that clear and engaging plan, it's extremely hard for all partners, including those that we're trying to persuade and bring along with us, to join us on the journey to net zero. So that's why I want to go far further. So, you know, for some clarity, I think you know, people need to be able to understand why it is that we want to change, what it is that we're changing, and why we should change, and what the benefits are from that change. There's really good examples in constituent authorities of climate-related action plans prepared in Cambridgeshire, the Cambridgeshire County Council one, the Peterborough City Council one, my own, the East Cambs one, which publishes a very well-received and I hope engaging annual plan each June. It includes a one-page summary of top 20 actions for the coming year that we try and engage everybody around. And that does galvanise a lot of activity in East Cambs. It's anything from planting single trees right up to proposals for commercial scale renewable sites. And I know many others are doing similar things. So, you know, you could take any one of these action plans and use them as a sort of framework to do this. And I think we need to excite our public, and this spreadsheet just isn't doing that at the moment. And I also think it's critical that we publish an annual update of the action plan so people can see it's moving, it's progressing, we're ticking things off, we've completed things. So my amendment to recommendation therefore is just not an objection to in any way, rather it's pushing the Combined Authority to commit to engage better on what it proposes to do, to be clearer to the public on what it proposes to do and why, and to commit to coming back to the board every year with progress. And without it, I just don't think we will engage our public. So the actual amendment, quickly read it out, endorse the proposed framework for an action plan as set out at Appendix 1 and ask the Climate Working Group to prepare by the 28th of February 2022 for subsequent consideration by the Board on 30th of March 2022 a more ambitious, comprehensive and public-friendly action plan setting out how the Combined Authority will take action to implement the recommendations of the Climate Commission and thereafter ensure an updated action plan is brought to the Board before the end of March each year. Thank you. And I have a seconder.
Oh, sorry, the seconder is Councillor Fuller. Oh, sorry, Councillor Fuller, do you want to speak to it as well?
I'll second and reserve my right to speak if necessary later on, Mayor.
Okay, fine. Shall we open this? Oh, sorry. Do you want to speak? Yes.
We're
going to debate.
Debating the amendments.
We are debating the amendment. Yeah, go to that amendment now. Yeah.
The proposed amendment from Councillor Bailey seems like a more pragmatic and engaging way in which to allow partners greater time to fully consider the issues, implications and the Climate Change Commission's recommendations.
Can I come in? Is that all right? Anybody? Yeah, I'm sure. Does anybody else? But I have. The reason I'm saying this because I just want to sort of, to some extent, back Councillor Bailey up, but just wanted to kind of well, no, I just want to fine-tune it because I've obviously mentioned about the partners and where we've got setting how the combined authority. The idea of this, you know, we're setting up a kind of climate working group which has to be inclusive of all members. But when it's so, we want to avoid the situation where it's just always talking about the combined authority. So my proposal as a further amendment, is that okay?
So you're able to propose another amendment if you take the view that both matters are closely linked, they can both be debated at the same time. You still need a seconder and there'd be a separate vote on them and they'd be taken in sequence.
So the idea being is that where we have the written down that, and we need to be pushing the agenda, I agree with that, so a more ambitious, comprehensive and public-friendly action plan setting how the combined authority and the partners on the group, because they're the ones we hope to deliver and give us sort of direction through consultation. So that's the addition, and the partners on the group will take action to implement the recommendations of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Independent Commission on Climate. And this is an important thing, or if agreement cannot be reached among the partners by that time, to kind of make sure it doesn't kind of, because there's a failure to get a report, that somehow it then gets knocked down the line. We need to acknowledge that if there is trouble pulling people together, that they still have to come back as the request to, in essence, really push it. There is a very tight timeline in this, but we do need to be pushed, and I appreciate Councillor Bailey's, but I just kind of wanted to put that sort of sunsetting clause in it as well.
So to hopefully assist the board, I've sent it out via email. We may try and be able to get it on the screen as well, but perhaps if members are able to access their email, they'll see that further amendment with the underlined text. I think you're still looking for a seconder.
Oh yes, sorry, Councillor Singer, thank you. So we can discuss both together as they're...
Yep.
Okay, and I believe it's Councillor Smart wants to come in on the particular amendment issue.
Thanks, Mayor. So I was just waiting to hear what you had to say because this amendment by Councillor Bailey only came to us yesterday, so not a lot of time really before the meeting. And I can't let it slip that I was at the previous meeting in June, and my distinct recollection was not as Councillor Bailey has reported it, but in fact she was trying to hold back our work on climate change at the time. Notwithstanding all the good work that's being done in East Cambs, as she's reported. So I can't see anything wrong with the existing, rather the amended item that you've suggested, Chair, so I would support that.
Thank you. To Councillor Bailey.
I'm afraid, Chairman, that is a gross misrepresentation of what I was trying to achieve at the last time back in June when we discussed this issue. What I was perfectly clearly trying to do was move immediately to begin the working group and get through a detailed discussion on all of the recommendations with all the partners around the table so that we could all move forward together. That is what my amendment was trying to do. In relation to the second amendment that's been put just now, I'm afraid I think it's trying to do more of what the concern was last time, which is about trying to force other people around the table into certain positions. And, you know, my district council has its own action plan. We're getting on with delivering ours. We're not talking about it. We do talk about it, but we're getting on and actually trying to do practical stuff. And a lot of it isn't easy. The waste fleet is our big problem. And I'm desperate to hear how other people have nailed that thorny issue. But this, you know, this can't be producing a list at the end of the year about how other partners around the table have failed. Everybody's doing their own thing. This is about holding the combined authority to account and being clear with what our action plan is by the combined authority. And some of that will say, we're trying to bring this group or this partner along. We're trying to influence our wider public to do X, Y, Z. And we need to hold ourselves to account on how we're doing that. This is about the actions of the combined authority, not the world and his wife, most of whom have their own very detailed and clear action plans a long time ago. Thanks.
Thanks. Councillor Fuller.
So, point of order, Chair.
Sorry, no,
point of
Councillor
order.
Fuller, no, sorry,
I'd just like to say I don't think the world is a man necessarily. So I'd just like to challenge that remark.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Point made.
Point of clarification. I do understand there are different genders on the planet, and it's a figure of speech. I do apologise if I've caused any offence to the member from Cambridge City.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller.
I don't know what to say, Mayor. But I'm not getting involved in that debate. I should tell you that now. I've learnt that much. You know, first of all, I would say I have to support Councillor Bailey. I think that was a gross misrepresentation from Councillor Smart of what Councillor Bailey tried to do back in the June meeting, and it's very disappointing to see things like that being brought out here and said in such a way. It's difficult, Mayor. I understand what you're trying to achieve with your amendment, sort of an amendment almost to our amendments, but for the very same reasons that Councillor Bailey has set out, I don't think it's practical. And this is the big debate, if you recall, we had back at the June board meeting, in the understanding around accountability. And I remember saying at that time, unless Councillor Smart's going to tell me I said something different, that in approving the way we did then, we were setting up false expectations around accountability. And I'm concerned that by endorsing your suggested wording, Mayor, we're going to do so even further, because ultimately Huntingdonshire District Council is not accountable to this combined authority. It's a constituent member of it. So I'm accountable to my members on the District Council. I'm not accountable to you or anyone else around this table. And my council is accountable to the residents of Huntingdonshire. So we don't need to come to a partnership climate working group, whatever you want to call it, and be accounting for what we may or may not be doing. That's not the purpose of what we're trying to do, or indeed what the original recommendation is trying to do. We as a combined authority in this report are setting out what we can do. And as Councillor Bailey has said, each of our individual constituent authorities are doing their own work on this area. We don't all agree. We know we don't all agree on that. That was the point we discussed in June. So what's the point in trying to set up a conflict within the climate working group where we know, you know, sadly, for whatever reason, we cannot reach consensus? And it's just setting up to say about that false accountability that won't do anything other than cause greater division. I think Councillor Bailey's amendment is very worthwhile, which is why I've seconded it. And I think we should stick to doing what we can do as a combined authority, and that's those actions from the Climate Change Commission that are within our direct control. We can't start trying to police what constituent authorities are doing, because as we heard in June, things were said by certain leaders at that meeting about things they were going to do, and then a couple of weeks ago we heard in a private meeting that they know they can't do them. So let's be really clear on this, Mayor. There is no point in creating false hope and expectations and accountability.
Thank you. I think it's... Sorry, Councillor Fitzgerald.
I wasn't going to say anything at all, actually, but I think I agree with Ryan. I get what you're trying to do here, Mayor, and I understand probably the good intentions of it, but echoing what Councillor Fuller's just said, look, I mean, we're in a different place in Peterborough than a lot of the constituent authorities. We're probably farther advanced, but there may be things in that plan that we can't deliver on, or we can't deliver on in the time, or there may be things that I can't afford to do, or for any number of reasons, and everybody is in a different place. I think, look, we're all signed up to the climate change agenda, and we will try our best to implement the Commission's thinking and plans and ideas, but also mindful of our own position within our own authorities about what the real world actually is. So I think Ryan's right. It's setting up really a conflict where there needn't be a conflict, because I think people in this room should take, you know, our best intentions to do so, rather than put in a condition that kind of compels us when the combined authority has no right to compel us to do anything.
Can I maybe come back, because I don't want to stir up a hornet's nest when it's unnecessary, but in terms of the amendment, is it the particular reference to "and the partners on the group" which is causing the biggest problem? Because it's the acknowledgement. What I was more worried, and that was more to be inclusive, but if it was more about just acknowledging that we are going to go into challenging times, but if we're not getting agreement on that action plan group and that working group, we actually acknowledge that we need to reconvene and kind of think more focused. So I would be happy to remove "and the partners on the group," but suggest that we still keep in the "or if the agreement cannot be reached among the partners by the time," to report on that and highlighting the fact that we're failing to agree, so that we work together. So I'm making that as a proposal.
The reporting that will come back will report on progress against the action plan. So that's what it's there to do. I don't think it's about naming and shaming any individual group or organisation. And I think I'm happy with my amendment as it was, and I would ask that be put and we vote on it.
Okay, sorry, Austin.
Yeah, I certainly welcome the amendment, and perhaps for us, slightly obscure angle here, that the challenge here is really fleshing out the actions and understanding where the challenges will sit within the actions. Now, that's not the rationale for doing that is then not to avoid squaring up to what we need to do to overcome the more difficult areas. In fact, what I see is opportunity. If we had a very clear understanding from a business perspective of where all these challenges sit, and we can translate them into opportunities, there is an opportunity for growth that we can support. And a classic example of that was, recent government intervention and statements around the use of heat pumps. There is not a large-scale heat pump manufacturer in the UK at all. They're all imported. And isn't that something that business would want to get its shoulder behind? And that's just one of what will be lots and lots of opportunities here. So the earlier we can start to flesh these out and properly understand the challenges, what the challenges are, the better. So I support Councillor Bailey's amendment. I also support the latter part of your amendment, Nick, to put a backstop on it, to make sure that we don't use it as an opportunity for it to run away with itself, and we do keep our feet to the fire. If we go back to what was previously agreed on this point, it was primarily on a best endeavours basis. I remember trawling through it line by line by line, and we weren't actually committing ourselves to something that was going to endeavour us to fail. It was really to make sure that we properly engaged and did our best. And taking this next step to just take time out to properly flesh out what all the issues are, in me, is a perfectly logical and natural next step.
Thank you, Austin. Actually, on this matter, I don't know how we do this, but I am, as the mover of the second amendment, I am going to suggest that I would like to withdraw "and the partners on the group," but with the support of the business board, the idea of a backstop, it still feels that that should remain, just so that the narrative is there. So how do I do that from a Chief Monitoring Officer point of view?
Just done it.
All right, have I done it?
As long as your seconder agrees with that.
You were happy with that, so we have removed "and the partners on the group," but the final thing, and referring to Austin, and thank you for that support on that, the idea of holding the working group's feet to the fire, so and getting things done. I'll come to you now, Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much indeed. So I mean, I think this is just completely unnecessary. I don't understand why we're even debating it in this way. However, it is really, really important that we are seen to be working together and we are seen to be in the same place. And I've been looking at the faces of some of the members of the public here, and yeah, they don't look too impressed to me, quite honestly. So, you know, if we have to work together, we have to show that as a combined authority, you know, we are prepared to move this forward at pace and deliver the stuff that none of us can do individually. So yes, great stuff's going on in East Cambridgeshire. And by the way, through the Mayor, Councillor Bailey, I'm sorry, I thought the information on the bin lorries had been shared with you. It's in your inbox now. So my apologies if my PA hadn't forwarded it on to you, but you have it now. So, you know, the whole point of the combined authority is to allow us to be more ambitious, to allow us to do things that we cannot do alone. And I mean, that's the rationale behind the ARC as well. So I will reluctantly support the amended amendment, but I won't support the initial amendment as it stands. Thank you.
So as I say, as it stands, the amendment is just asking after that if agreement cannot be reached among partners by that time, it's just to clarify that we're holding it to account. Councillor Fuller?
Can I just clarify, because I'm starting to wonder if there's some sort of wall here today where the others over on the other side can't quite hear what we're saying over it, because I don't think anyone suggested that we don't want to work together on this. The whole point that we've all agreed to set up this climate working group so we all come together and work on this is the very principle of what we're talking about. And, you know, I will just make a couple of specific points because the members of the public have been referred to and their sort of dismay at this. So, Mayor, where you're suggesting that we have this backstop, where we have to report into the Combined Authority Board, where agreement cannot be reached among partners by that time, I will give you one very specific example where we will not reach agreement by that time, and that's on moving our waste fleets to renewable, completely electric. You know, and members of the public may not understand this point, but actually in Cambridge and Peterborough, that's a far easier ask than it is in rural Huntingdonshire, South Cambs and East Cambs. Yeah. So we're not signed up to a 2030 agreement to do that because the technology does not yet exist. It is physically impossible. So what's the point of us going into this working group and saying, well, we must report where these disagreements are occurring, because we know we disagree on that, because we know we cannot do it. That's why I say you are setting up divisions where they do not need to exist, because that's not an issue of not working in partnership. It's an issue of it's unachievable for some of us, where it's more achievable for others. That's the point we're trying to make, Mayor. It's not about not working together. Of course we're working together, and of course we can do more together than we can alone, but some elements are completely within the individual remit of our individual authorities. You know, my waste fleet is very different to Councillor Fitzgerald's waste fleet, and you know, the two are not alike. We just can't do it.
Okay, so Councillor Fuller, we want to work together. I'm sure we all want to work together. And just to clarify, you know and I know that there's nothing that the Combined Authority can dictate to your organisation how to do things. That's not what this is about. It never has been. It's about trying to foster that kind of combined authority approach to dealing with the challenges. So if say, in the you know, towards when we're meant to do a plan, different authorities are struggling on different areas of sort of the ambitions, there's no sin in that. That's fine. We just have to be open about it and just say, well, how do we help to work each other better? That's what it's about. It's not. I really am trying not to kind of thing. I'm trying to withdraw things, and I actually see what Councillor Bailey's trying to achieve. But it's just that final thing about just making sure that if we set up this kind of climate working group, and there are some, you know, some fantastic names and have been put forward, and as well as all the constituent members. But if that climate working group kind of keeps coming round the circle and we keep kicking things around and they struggle to kind of work out what can be done, what can be achieved, and then they say, well, we're not going to report, we just want to acknowledge that it is a challenge and we need to bring it back for that discussion. That's all it's about. That's how I see it. Can we vote now on the
the amendment as it stands.
I'll take us through it. So,
all right, fine. No, can we just go through this and?
Nick, can I just say I'd like to make a comment on the paper overall after the vote?
Yes.
We're voting on the amendments now, so there'll be an opportunity to debate the paper in full. So Mayor, I see Councillor Smart has his hand in the air.
Councillor Smart.
Just for clarity, Mayor, do we need to see your amended amendment to the amendment? We haven't seen the text of that. It's just been...
Mayor, I did email it, but...
Sorry, I might not have gone to... All right, can we go through process, please?
Yeah, so members, let's break this down. We've got two amendments. The first amendment is Councillor Bailey's amendment, and we'll vote on them in sequence. We're reminded that as any decision of the Combined Authority Board, it is in this instance a simple majority item, but by our order that majority must include a vote in favour of the Mayor. So we're going to start with the vote to amend Lim A of the recommendations with the text proposed by Councillor Bailey and seconded by Councillor Fuller. Could I have votes in favour? So 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah,
sure.
This one's lost, no.
Well, no, one. Sorry, I was asked a question there. Could I understand the question from the?
This is lost. You go on to that being the next motion.
Sorry, Mayor. So just to remind ourselves as the sequence here, we're voting in turn on the amendments. They are freestanding in my view, but essentially, you may reflect on whether you want to vote for both. The vote for anything in terms of decision making must include the Mayor. I'm asking members in the first instance whether they favour and wish to amend the recommendation in the report in the form that Councillor Bailey, as seconded by Councillor Fuller, have proposed. That's one item. Could I have votes in favour of making that amendment in that form?
And what if the vote is lost, Robert, please?
We then move on to the second amendment, which is a freestanding amendment. We take them in turn, and there'll be votes in favour and against that amendment.
So if this is one, do we still move on to the second amendment?
Through you, Chair. Yes, we do. They're both freestanding amendments. One happens to build on the text of another, but they're both freestanding amendments.
Thank you. It's slightly complicated, but okay. Tell me about it.
So, sorry, members, again to ask, could I have votes in favour of Councillor Bailey's proposed amendment? That's 4 in favour. And could I have votes against that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that amendment falls. We're now moving to the second proposed amendment, the freestanding amendment. That's the text as proposed by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Neth Singer. We note that that's been circulated to you. The text and the partners on the group has now been removed. Could I ask for votes in favour of that amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you. And could I have votes against that, please? So, sorry, I'll just ask again. So votes for, just for clarity.
Are we going? Sorry, can we just get the vote?
Can you get quiet?
Sorry, Councillor Fitzgerald, Deputy. Sorry, can you just? Sorry.
Just 1 meeting.
I was voting for the second amendment on the basis democracy says so.
Let's just conduct the vote, please, for my benefit. So here we are. Votes for. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 votes, including the Mayor. 4 votes against, please. And abstentions, please. 2 abstentions. That amendment is carried. So the report is amended. The recommendations are amended. We now move to the debate on the substantive motions as amended, and there is an opportunity for debate and comment.
Sorry, can we just kind of have a moment? We're about to move on to the debate for the paper. Thank you, Councillor Singer.
So on the main paper, I am very pleased that this has come forward. I do think it's really important that we all work together on this, and I think that I've got a long list of things that officers from the County Council have asked me to ask about it, and I'm not going to ask them all here because we've had quite a long debate, and they're on details of the action plan and things that the County Council officers would really like to be able to support the Combined Authority with working on. So rather than go through that list, what I'm going to ask is that we just make sure that we are working incredibly closely together on this, because just with almost everything that the Combined Authority does, we will achieve so much more if we do it in partnership, and if we use the expertise that is there across the whole Combined Authority area. And there is a lot of expertise out there in all of our different councils, and we're very keen to put it at your for the Combined Authority to be able to use. So I think rather than going through the list of saying, please can we be lead on this, and please can we make sure that this is happening, and what's the timescale for that, I'll send you those. But basically, I'm really pleased this is happening, and we do need to be working really closely together on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in and talk about the actual report? All that hard work, Adrian. Councillor Bailey.
I just want to say that I think what's just taken place is an absolute display of what's wrong with the politics of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. There we have an amendment put forward myself, which has been basically hijacked by the Mayor so that he can have his name on it, and the opposition, the other parties opposite, choosing which way they want to go on amendment that is basically mine. And I expect I can look forward to Twitter activity now, and the member from Cambridge City saying that I've failed to support having a detailed action plan and holding the Combined Authority to account. It's perfectly clear that that was my amendment. I'm trying to push us forward, and I'm sorry that this has not been a display of working together in cooperation. There was nothing wrong with my amendment.
I agree with you. It was a great amendment, just needed a little bit of fine-tuning, and I really absolutely didn't want to kind of hijack it. I would have loved you to put your name to it as well, but I'm sorry. Move on talking about the Councillor Fuller. Okay, Councillor Fuller.
Well, I would agree with Councillor Bailey, Mayor. I think, we had this discussion and these points were made back in June about how disappointing it is about the way things are taking place when we're having these discussions. And it seems that there's purposeful division being sown, where actually I don't think there is much division on this at all. And I said this in June, of let's try to get to that point of consensus and agreement. Mayor, what you've done there is technically, procedurally allowed, but I think it's actually in very poor form, poor taste. You've taken the exact wording, you haven't fine-tuned anything, you've taken the exact wording of an amendment put by Councillor Bailey, you've added one line in, and you've effectively hijacked it, was the word that was used, and that's just really poor form. So what you've done is you've created the division you were seeking, you've created the public headline you were seeking, you've caused what Councillor Bailey said will happen as a result of this, yet again, unnecessarily, and it's not what this Combined Authority is about, Mayor. There was no need whatsoever for that to happen.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Singer?
Yeah, I do, because I think it's really unfair. I think that there was a possibility of trying to get consensus on this amendment. That's why the Mayor brought a second amendment, because he wanted to try and find consensus. And actually to say that it was only about politics and about the Mayor getting his name on it, that sentence that is in there now that was not in there before makes a difference. It makes a difference to what happens in March, and it makes a difference to how much of the debate and the discussion about where we find agreement and where we don't is then brought back to this board and discussed in public, and that's really important. And maybe that's why we've had what looks like quite a long debate on something which is, as I agree, quite a minor point. It is a minor point. Sometimes minor points are important, and on this occasion I think that one was. I think it is important that we have that we report back on where the working group has got to, and we bring that report back. There is much agreement on the need to tackle climate change. There are small places where we disagree, and sometimes those small places are important. And to try and portray that as just people playing politics, or people, or particularly the mayor, trying to find division when actually what he's been trying to do quite hard is not to have division, I think is very unfair.
Thank you, Ms. Singer. Councillor Smart.
So, just a question for Paul. So, I mean, is net zero enough, Paul?
Sorry, through the chair.
Sorry, through the chair, Paul.
Okay.
Is net zero enough, or should we have less than zero, or perhaps zero? So, I think that's a question that's relevant to this.
Do you want to come back on that?
So in terms of the Commission's recommendations, they mapped out a potential path to net zero, but that did include making sequestration of carbon as part of the final element needed to get there, in that there would always be some emissions that couldn't be reduced, and therefore other activities such as tree planting or carbon capture and other rates would be required to get us to the target by 2050. So in terms of net zero, obviously that is the government's legal target that we are looking at how it's implemented in our area, but there will be obviously opportunities to go beyond that in terms of putting in compensatory measures that take some carbon out of the atmosphere, and that was part of the path that was set out.
Thank you. Councillor Fitzgerald.
On a positive note, let's try and be positive. Great paper. I would like, for the benefit of everybody in the room, to know we are 2030, not 2050. In Peterborough, it's quite ambitious, and I'll use Austin's expression, which from our point of view it is best endeavours. We will do all we can to get where we need to be in the time that we need to do it, but I or no politician can guarantee anything. So I think we are all on the same team. We are all pulling together for the right reasons. I know sometimes it may not seem that way, but I genuinely believe we are, and I think I don't want to spend any more time talking about this. I'm just happy to move on and get it approved.
Yep, and I'm happy to move to the vote as well. So I would like just to, as I say, we can move to the vote. So please raise your hands if you are in favour, obviously taking into consideration the amendment to A. Those in favour? Those against? And those abstaining? So one abstention. Thank you. Can I ask those gathered, I mean, we have a bit more to go. Do you want to push on through? There is lunch, or do you want to just...
How long are we going to go?
All right, well, okay. The Oxcam ARC, sorry. Right. Okay, item 2.6, the Oxcam ARC environment principles. The strategic planning manager stays with us to introduce. Adrian.
Thank you. Yes, I'll try and keep this quick. We've heard already of the ongoing consultation work by government in terms of the Oxcam ARC spatial framework. One of the pieces of work that local partners have done to feed into that was to, through the ARC Environment Group, develop a set of principles that should be adopted by government in taking forward the framework and setting out ambitions for the area. And we've been asked as individual authorities across the ARC, including the Command Authority, to endorse those principles, and those are there set out in the appendix and are recommended to you. It sets out our leadership and our ambitions that align with the doubling nature ambition that we've already endorsed as an authority. I don't know if the lead member wants to comment.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you very much, Mayor. So we heard David Attenborough last night speaking about nature and saying that if we treat it with little thought or care, we will pay the price. So the Oxcam ARC environment principles will hopefully demonstrate a commitment to treating the whole region with thought and care. And that thought and care could play a significant part in avoiding existing and future residents paying that high price. So the principles were created by a working group consisting of 40 or 50 experts. It was a real privilege to be in the room with them, actually. And they came from government bodies, NGOs, third sector, and they were really ably led by the RSPB, and who really did the sort of final drafting of this work, and considerable thanks to them. So they've been adopted by the whole leadership of the ARC, 45 council leaders, difficult to get that many people agreeing, and they've been endorsed by many constituent councils, including my own. So the ultimate ambition is to create a truly green ARC, with all new housing built to zero carbon standards, existing housing retrofitted to the highest possible standards, communities where car ownership is optional because they're so well connected, and doubling of every aspect of nature. So, I do trust this is something leaders and Mayor that we can all agree on, and that we can all endorse these principles on behalf of the combined authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Does anybody want to come into the debate? Councillor Fuller.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this just goes to the very point of what I said on the previous item, doesn't it? And it really does demonstrate the ability, under Councillor Smith's leadership, of the Oxcam ARC Environmental Working Group, I think it was called, to achieve that consensus, by 45 council leaders of all parties, which is saying something indeed. But that's the reality, is 45 council leaders of all parties have said yes to this. We agree, we have reached consensus. And therefore it just reinforces my point that it's very disappointing that there's an issue in this combined authority that prevents us reaching that consensus. So my council is very happy to support this. We're taking the principles, we've taken it through scrutiny in Cabinet already. We're actually taking to full council in December, where I expect they will be endorsed because they've received unanimous endorsement at scrutiny and Cabinet, and we're using them to inform the refresh of our own environmental strategy. I just think an important point that might not necessarily come out in Councillor Smith's introduction, and through you, Mayor, I don't know if she wants to just take a minute perhaps to comment on this, because I have noted locally that this has been misrepresented as the government imposing certain environmental principles upon us, whereas actually I've been very quick to explain, no, these are our principles, and I think that's a really important distinction, if Councillor Smith wouldn't mind making.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
well,
it's important.
thank you very much indeed, Councillor Fuller, for making that point. So back when I first became leader of South Cambridge and started attending Oxcam ARC meetings, the environment was nowhere. It was, it wasn't mentioned, and it was a real battle to get the minister at the time, who I think was Kit Malthouse, to agree to the establishment of environment working stream. And it wasn't what everybody wanted, but actually what we're told now is it's the one work stream of the four that has really delivered, and it's done really, really well. So this work absolutely originates from those 45 councils and from all those other organisations, NGOs, lots of local environmental groups have played a significant role in shaping those. So the challenge now is not so much to get the combined authority and all the leaders to agree to it. The challenge is to get government to agree to it, and the government to sign up to our environmental principles. And I really appreciate you raising that. Thank you.
Are we ready to move to a vote? Anybody else want to? Okay, please. So we'll move to a vote. Councillor Smith is moving the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Fuller. So votes in favour? Unanimous. Easy. Okay. So thank you, everyone. We'll move on to the final stretch, hopefully. Part 3, which are governance reports. The 3.1 is the annotated forward plan. It's published online and is updated regularly. If there are any decisions on the forward plan which are allocated to the executive committees which members think should be dealt with by the Combined Authority Board instead, they should indicate this now so that the board can take a view.
Correct.
Okay.
Sorry, so long since I've been in.
Must get a new sign on the door.
So if there's no other comments on the forward plan, we'll move to the vote. I'm moving that we approve the forward plan for November. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nissinger, thank you.
I will take it that the forward plan is approved unanimously unless anyone indicates otherwise now. Okay, fine, we'll move on then. And then the appointment of independent persons. Item 3.2 is the appointment of independent persons. The governance manager will introduce the report. Hello.
Yeah, sorry, Mayor. Actually, it's going to be the Deputy Monitoring Officer.
My apologies.
Rochelle Tapping, who's just sitting at the table.
Sorry, Rochelle. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, officers. The report before you has the following recommendations: to approve the appointment of David Pearl as independent person for the combined authority for a term of 4 years, and to also approve the appointment of Gillian Holmes as reserve independent person for the combined authority for a term of 4 years. The Localism Act tasks the authority with the responsibility of deciding how to deal with standard issues, including arrangements for dealing with complaints. The Act requires the appointments of the independent persons to discharge those responsibilities. This matter came last before the board in July, where the board agreed to the appointment process and the role description, and also to recruit 2 independent persons. The reason for 2 independent persons is because it allows for conflict of interest circumstances. The lead IP will be paid £1,000. The reserve IP will be paid £500, and there's also travel and parking expenses allowable. The CVs for both proposed appointees, is appendix to this report. In terms of the statutory regime, the Act sets out who may not be an independent person, which is a person who is a member of the authority, or a person who has a relative or close friend who is a member of the authority. Both appointees have confirmed that neither is applicable to them. It's not unusual for an IP to operate for several local authorities. We see this in Greater Manchester, where the IP for the Greater Manchester Combined Authority is also the IP at Trafford Council. And also Warwickshire has a joint panel where the IPs may act for more than one authority. I'm happy to take questions, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anybody want to make any comments around this paper? Councillor Fuller.
It's not a question, Mayor, and I'm sorry I have to say this in public, because I don't have any problem at all with Ms Holmes, but I have a bit of an objection about collecting these roles. I have to say, it's the first time I'd realised actually that this individual, I think, serves all of us other than Fenland. And I hear that it's possible. I just don't think it's very healthy, and I think we should seek to find someone else.
Do you want to come back on that? Because obviously it's an open, invitation. We obviously can't manhandle people to do this, but.
Thank you, Mayor. I would say that there's no prohibition in the legislation, and certainly that is a model that other authorities and indeed combined authorities have adopted that suggests it's probably best practice, Mayor.
Thank you. I've got another. Sorry, can I just? I'll come back, Councillor Fuller. Just out of interest, how was the process advertised?
So the applications were advertised, and there was an interview held on the 18th of October. We had 3 candidates, and the 2 preferred candidates were offered the position.
Okay, thank you.
Positions.
And just out of interest, where was it advertised?
So it was advertised on social media platforms and our combined authority website.
Okay, fine, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Fuller, do you want to come in?
Sorry, just have clarity on what's best practice. Are you suggesting having the same independent person across multiple councils is best practice?
So probably better to say a better practice.
I'd probably say it's not unusual practice, if I can just dive in. Certainly local authorities will often impanel together. I completely acknowledge the point about optics, and also there's a practical aspect to this. I would say two things. Number one, it's really important we have independent persons that are ready to respond should any standards complaints come in. It has been a concern of mine that we've had a gap in that. We have a legal obligation to have somebody involved. We don't know if if complaints could come forward. So it's for me, very important to have this appointment made. Completely acknowledge that. I think what I would say is that we'll monitor actually, and we'll be vigilant to ensure that we're, as proper officers for the administration of this process, confident that that role is being operated effectively.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to come back on that? Yes.
Just one further point, Mayor. So it's the lead member, sorry, the lead IP will be leading on most matters, and if there is a conflict situation, then there will be a reliance on the reserve. So it's likely that there might not even be matters for the reserve to dispose of.
Okay, thank you for the point of clarity. Oh, hello. Sorry, do you want to come in?
Yes, please. Just to say that I do actually know David Pearl, and slightly from experience, he actually taught me when I was a student. But following his career, he is fearlessly independent and has an enormous wealth of experience. So I don't perceive any risk whatsoever that are identified by Councillor Fuller.
Thank you.
Personal explanation, Mayor. That's not who I'm talking about. I've made no reference about Mr. Pearl.
Councillor Fuller actually referenced it was Ms. Holmes.
I do beg your pardon, but point of clarification, I do beg your pardon. I just heard independent person as opposed to reserve independent.
Thank you. Well, it's good to have a further reassurance. Anyway, Daryl, sorry.
Just a point here. So the second person here is getting paid £500 for potentially doing nothing. That concerns me just slightly, because I suspect all of our agencies and districts could do with that £500.
Okay, well, yes, I think I need to bring in the Chief Monitoring Officer on that point.
Just in relation to that, possibly, who knows? Having worked around member conduct matters, sometimes one gets a lot in a spate, and that standing start may actually be an extremely busy role, and it is a fixed remuneration, and there would be an expectation that even if they're extremely busy, that covers it. So it's an equation of risk and consequence, isn't it, there for those taking that role? And just to generally, hopefully, give some comfort, we interviewed these individuals. We interviewed them with the chair of the Audit and Governance Committee. We're aware of our obligation to not only test the statutory test for independent person, capital I, capital P, but also be satisfied that they can operate in the role. We wouldn't be bringing individuals as recommended people to this board to a point if we had any doubts about that. But it's certainly, we will operate it sensitively and be aware of the comments that are made today.
Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, just wanted to add. I mean, I just think it does raise quite a lot of eyebrows around the table and probably amongst members of the public. But yeah, the authorities tend to have two independent persons. And when you say it will go to the second person if there is an issue of conflict, you mean a conflict of interest, perhaps because the first independent person knows the individual or something like that?
Yeah, perhaps a closeness or a concern, so we have to remove the first person.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, I mean, the second independent person is very unfortunate. We're dealing with individuals here, but Ms. Holmes is an independent person at East Cambs District Council, and I did have the occasion very recently to see her in action. I wasn't subject member, I hasten to add, and she is a qualified solicitor. I've just read on her CV, and that doesn't surprise me at all because she was superbly professional and gave me every confidence in how she was proceeding at the meeting. So whilst it does raise some eyebrows, and I know it's not necessarily easy to recruit these people, so I'm happy to go along with it. But I do think it just needs some careful monitoring and consideration. And I can see a scenario where she may have been involved in one of the constituent authorities and then required to get involved with the same person, for example, at this authority. So it's not an ideal situation, but I'm happy to go along with it. Thanks.
Okay, well, I think it was an important point to highlight, and thank you for the councillors bringing that to the table. But at the same time, I think we'd all acknowledge that we have to be grateful for these people who put themselves forward for these roles. And I know, Councillor Smart, do you want to come in on that?
Sorry, Chair, I know there's been a huge amount of debate on this, isn't there? But I did have a point, that it's a different point. So I just wondered whether there was any advantage in having an overlap of terms, because if they're both coming for 4 years and then leaving after the end of 4 years, then we have 2 more. Should it be that one comes for 2, then the next one for 4, and so they have a 2-year overlap or something, so that they're not both coming and going at the same time?
I'll let Robert come back on that. Chief Monitoring Officer.
That's a sensible suggestion. We haven't offered it on that basis, and I would. I think we need to trust in our ability to manage key dates as proper officers for the authority, as an alternative to that.
Thank you for the suggestion. Noted. To hopefully now move to the vote, please. So those in favour of taking these recommendations as approved, please raise your hands if you're in favour. That's unanimous. Thank you. And then finally, on the final straight, 3.3, updated GDPR policies. Rochelle White, as our Deputy Monitoring Officer, you've stayed at the table. Could you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Mayor. So the board asks to approve and adopt the new GDPR policies that are set out, Appendix 1 to 7, and to delegate authority to the monitoring officer to make consequential amendments to those policies. To give the board some background, there was an independent report on information governance at the combined authority some time ago in October of last year. One of the recommendations within that report was that all GDPR policies be updated. The combined authority is in an SLA with PCC for assistance with GDPR, and that assistance included provision of the policies you see before you. 2.4 sets out the new policies and what is contained. The policies went to the Audit and Governance Committee on the 24th of September, who are recommending these policies to yourselves. Subsequently, at paragraph 2.6, you can see that there have been some further amendments to those policies just to cover risk management, compliance and training for officers, and reviews of performance against those policies. In addition, staff will be trained on how to use the policies once implemented. And for your information, staff have undertaken mandatory GDPR training. Currently, 79% of all officers have completed this learning. Happy to take questions, Mayor.
Open to debate. Thank you, Risha. Any questions or comments? Important issue? Okay. So important, stand in silence. Thank you. So we'll move to the vote. I'm moving the recommendation from the chair. Do I have a seconder? My deputy, Councillor Fitzgerald. Thank you. I felt it all the time. Okay, can we go to the vote? Those in favour? I will take that as unanimous. Thank you. Okay. So at just after 12 minutes past 1. That concludes today's business. Thank you for all of the members attending today, those co-opted members, members of the public, those watching at home. The board will next meet on Wednesday, the 24th of November. The meeting is now closed. Thank you.